here to my right.
Good morning, Sean Sullivan with the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council.
Ray Sharmonti with T-Barda.
Here, let me give you the microphone and just pass it around.
David Gwen, FDOT District 7.
Steve Diaz, Hernando Citrus MPO.
Manny Lashby, MPO staff, welcome to Pasco County.
Jack Mariano, Pasco County Commissioner.
Catherine Starkey, Pasco County Commissioner. Good morning, Beth Alden, Hillsborough MPO Director.
Charles Klug, the Hillsborough MPO.
Dave Edgars, Pinellas County Commissioner, and on the Forward Pinellas.
Whit Planton, Executive Director for Forward Pinellas.
John Torninga, Vice Mayor, City of Dunedin, the Pinellas MPO.
Brad Miller with the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority.
Good morning, Janet Long, Pinellas County Commissioner and Chair of the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council and PSTA, and I also am on Forward Pinellas.
Thank you. If you'll just pass the microphone behind you, we'll go around.
Richard Moss, DOT, District 7, Transportation Development Director.
Mangao, Florida DOT, District 7.
Bill Johnson, T-Barda, CAC.
John Villeneuve, Pasco MPO.
Welcome.
Dave Sobush, Tampa Bay Partnership.
Kathy Steele, Laker Lutz News.
Chris Ravella, President of Historic Ybor Neighborhood Civic Association.
Bonnie Epstein with Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority.
Doyle Walsh, the Commissioner Long's office.
Chelsea Favre, Fort Pinellas. Diane Jones, Detail Relations, a Pasco County business. Randy Miklas, Jacobs.
Ed McKinney, Florida Department of Transportation.
Sarah McKinley, Hillsborough MPO.
Johnny Wong, Hillsborough MPO.
Dennis Dix, Hernando Citrus MPO.
Alex Setti, Hillsborough County.
Hillary Lehman, Fort Pinellas.
Bob Clifford, WSB.
Scott Bringola Jacobs.
Charlie Long, FDOT.
Corey Creosote, FDOT.
Danielle Moran, HNTB.
Stephen Benson, FDOT.
Christina Kopp, Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority.
Good morning, Roger Roscoe, FDOT, District 7.
Kelly Miller, Pasco County MPO CAC.
Rich Clarendon, MPO staff at Hillsborough County.
Brian Beatty, District 7, FDOT.
Jerry Presley, citizen, Hillsborough County.
Steve Henley, Beach Strand Clearwater.
John Tewksbury, Beach Strand Clearwater.
Tom Nacera, today representing St. Pete Tampa Aerial Transit LLC. Ali Atefi, Pasco MPO staff.
Cal Hardy, City of Tampa Transportation.
Diane Causa, self, from Cypress Hill.
Daryl Henderson, Clearwater Regional Chamber of Commerce.
Rob Kersey, Tyndale Oliver.
We had someone join us.
Good morning, Laura Lawson, Commissioner Kim's office.
Tom Brown, City of St. Petersburg Transportation Department.
Sharon Calvert.
Pinellas County citizen. Charlotte Greenbart, Hillsborough County citizen.
Commissioner Pat Count. Oh, that's it? Hillsborough.
Yes, and one more.
Good morning, Jim Meyer with AE County.
Okay, thank you. Perfect timing. Yeah. Okay, so everyone around the table, and I hope in the audience as well, should have a couple of items in front of you. An agenda packet that looks like this. A citizen asked that the article that's been placed around the table be distributed. We'll acknowledge that further in a moment. And there is also at the table a packet from Planned Hillsborough. The agenda today, first of all, this is now the 28th meeting of this group. This group was established in 2014, really, although the meetings began in 2013, and the group was established to set priorities within the Tampa Bay Transportation Management Agency, or area, excuse me, Tampa Bay Transportation Management Area, which encompasses parts of Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Pasco County. We'll make that the short version of the story, but the group has been establishing those priorities for that portion of the region since 2014. The group operates on a cycle that has it update those priorities in or by mid-year. In this case, we're in May. In other years, it's been in June. But in any case, today is the meeting at which the group will need to look at its priorities from last year and decide whether it wants to make any refinements to those. There have been a number of discussions in the meetings earlier this year that lead up to and support that activity today, but that is the first activity on the agenda for today, the 10 o'clock discussion, and we'll get into a little bit more detail about how we'll do that in just a moment. There is a regional effort with the 3 MPOs participating to develop a regional long-range transportation plan. The 11 o'clock discussion will present some of the growth scenarios that are being looked at as the foundation for that effort. And then we have a number of updates on activities that are ongoing at the end of the meeting. So that's the bulk of the meeting. Probably the most significant pieces are the update to the priorities and the LRTP scenarios. We do normally take public comment at the beginning of the meeting. So before we get into the details of the first discussion, we have one public comment request here. If there are other folks who would like to offer public comment, we ask that you go to the back table and fill out one of these, and we will go ahead and take that comment now at the beginning of the meeting. Welcome, Commissioner Roman.
Sorry I'm late. It was a lot longer drive than I expected.
But hopefully it gets the traffic.
Coming out of Tampa, it was still heavy going to USF, but County Commissioner Sandy Norman.
Hillsborough. And I want to note for the Hillsborough folks, today is the State of the City address. We realize that presented some conflicts for you. Thank you for being here today. Okay, I saw a couple of people fill out requests. We'll have those in a moment, and we'll take public comment, and then we'll begin the discussion. And we do have some new folks around the table. They introduce themselves, but Steve, welcome. And Charles, you've been with us intermittently. Welcome. Okay, so the other requests are coming up. I apologize if I get this mispronounced. Chris Vella, is that correct? Or
Right.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
Chris. Okay.
Far away.
All right. So if you would, we are fairly flexible with public comment. If you would try to limit your comments to 3 minutes, and please state your name and affiliation for the record.
Absolutely. So my name is Christopher Bella. I live at 9241 half East 11th Avenue, Tampa 33605. Thank you for welcoming us to do public comment here. So as a City of Tampa resident, I'm expressing environmental justice concerns related to my neighborhood's quality of life, and also the lack of just leadership within our transportation authorities to manage federally endorsed studies. And lastly, the honesty of the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan, known as the RTFP, survey and results thus far. Is this board aware that the downtown interchange takes 100 acres from our downtown neighborhoods in Tampa, and will continue to take more if expanded? That since the 1960s, the DTI, known as the downtown interchange, with I-4 has displaced 4,000 people locally, just for regional needs? Is this board aware that according to Hillsborough County MPO's Health Atlas, my neighborhood is at 95 to 100% lifetime cancer risk among other minority neighborhoods next to the DTI? Is this board aware that FDOT has aggressively purchased or bid properties in my neighborhood, despite a plan has not been actually determined? Or aware of lost properties to fires or failure to secure neglect properties by FDOT? I demand this board to not prioritize the DTI and to remove it from our TIP, as well as an SAI, and remove it as an SIS project, excuse me. The infrastructure is a discriminating health and economic risk to my neighborhood. The Tampa Bay Times reported this month that 91% of home-to-work trips that started in Hillsborough County ended there. Same thing for Pinellas at 86%. So why are we prioritizing regional needs over local trips, or just local true BRT where it counts? Jacobs continues to push this fake BRT as being cost-effective, but has there been any consideration of local cost of stations, operations, duplicity of running a parallel circulation service to interstate buses? What about the 27,900 accidents reported by the Florida Highway Safety Motor Vehicles of Hillsborough County last year? Everyone has used an interstate is fully aware that the shoulders in such roads are riddled from fallout from wrecks, and even remote traffic is slowed, which would impact the fake BRT level of service. Also, was any transit ever judged against the reduction of air quality or lifetime cancer risk in my neighborhood? Secretary Gwynn, quoted as saying, noted that the legislation wouldn't make rail line purchases without a project to go with CSX. Why would a transit mode that could theoretically move 40 to 60,000 people per hour have such conditions over fake BRT? Our county's Imagine 2040 survey that had 35,000 people actually surveyed in it selected rail as a top choice. The RTFP survey assumed a choice with BRT, not an actual selection as a preferred transit mode. So if you go on a survey now, you actually have to select a mode with BRT. The public is once again pigeonholed to agree with BRT no matter the circumstances. I'm alarmed that during a recent FDOT community workshop meeting, our proposed downtown intermodal station may shift to another location, despite an EIS study already determined a location by purchasing properties years ago in downtown. Or in the case of West Shore, FDOT chose to spend $45 million acquiring a site that was never originally qualified as a site option for the intermodal EIS study, outranking other sites who themselves were extensively studied with recognized value. I demand responsibility on the current impacts and to uphold the value of our studies. I demand removal of the DTI as a priority in the Hillsborough County TIP by June 12th. And as Commissioner Mariano recommended, to look at private investment and resulting development around rail stations as a funding source for the highly popular CSX option over fake BRT. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next commenter is Charlotte Greenberg. Just hand the microphone, and again, if you would state your name, address, and affiliation for the record.
My name is Charlotte Greenberg. I live in Lutz in the sanctuary on Livingston, and I am a Hillsborough County taxpayer. And I've been involved in transit since Metro fell, as John Dorchner of the Miami Herald Traffic magazine dubbed it. I thought this was the worst thing I had ever seen. These are the white elephants walking across the Metrofell tracks in Dade County. This was titled Metro Rail, How a Magnificent Idea Became a White Elephant. This was my first experience with the failure of fixed rail. They are so depleted of ridership that they are looking for ways to get people on it in Dade County, in spite of what the Hillsborough MPO was told. And they still haven't had it. And I thought that was the worst until I moved here. And I came upon Go Hillsborough, as we called it, No-Go Hillsborough. They wanted to put a tax on the ballot, which had failed 3 times in several counties, for fixed rail again. There was an uproar, there was a revolution, and they decided wisely not to put that tax on the ballot because it was not going to pass. Now I see that there is a plan to take 275, to take lanes off of 275 from Bears to downtown. Just when I thought the prior two were the most idiotic I'd ever heard, this one comes along. One of the major evacuation routes, and they're planning on taking lanes away from 275. We obviously have a planning problem. We also have an intellect problem, people dealing with the things that people need to hear and people need to use. Don't believe me. Believe Florida Trend's editor, Mark Howard, in the March 2018 Florida Trend. Yesterday's solutions. The highlight, nearly 2/3 of Americans say they never take public transportation. The future is that way. Fixed rail is the past. If you look at the study Florida Trend did on millennials, this is from the February 2017 Florida Trend. Mass transit didn't score high either. A notable finding for a generation known for getting driver's licenses late and viewing cars as utilitarian rather than a mode of self-expression. I was on a transportation infrastructure and concurrency task force appointed by a Dade County commissioner. I was the minority, one of 7, a citizen taxpayer who objected to the plan to pass another sales tax increase for yet more Metrofill. We went around the county in public hearings. Everybody heard. I was always expressing a minority opinion. I wasn't afraid to do it because I knew what people were thinking. And the tax failed. So, you know, these are the realities of life. Look forward, not back.
Thank you. Next commenter, Sharon Calvin. And again, if you would state your name and affiliation for the record and address.
I've got a few copies of these, but what I'd like is, I would like everyone to have a copy of this. And I'm going to also give you a couple other sheets that I have. We'll see them. Yeah, that's fine. So it is now almost the middle of May. I'm Sharon Calvert. I live in Pinellas County. And June 1st officially starts the hurricane season once again. It made dredge yesterday. Are we going to be ready? Here's a picture, it's in the package that I'm going to leave behind, of our major evacuation routes. That includes 275 across the bridge and north. So I'm very, very concerned about what I see with the Hillsborough NPO and the scenarios that they have out there. Very different from other scenarios I've seen. They have specific projects. And I think that those here at this table from Pinellas and Pasco need to be very concerned. If you're going to do a regional LRTP, I hope that you will ensure that your residents understand that one of the scenarios is to remove 275 from Barris to downtown, put a street level boulevard in, and the other one, specific scenario, it's a project, not a scenario, is the CSX rail corridor. Again, I've never seen this in the planning before, but in 2040, this is right from the Hillsborough long-range planning. It shows the capacity needs. I'm going to leave this behind. This is what it shows for 275. Traffic volumes, this is from the Hillsborough NPO 2040 LRTP. This is what we don't, if we don't do anything. It's red. There was just recently in 2016, I believe Parsons-Brinkerhoff did another study on that corridor. Again, they said they needed capacity. What I'm concerned about is what's in the documentation, because in the UPWP for Hillsborough, originally there was a chart, and basically it was this chart, and when I asked how it came to be, and it says the first option on here that everybody wants is light rail, which I questioned, was they did some polling, and they did polling at some TV Next meetings. But if you look at the TV Next meetings, look at who attend, some of them were not well attended. Half of them were bureaucrats or part of the bureaucracy. So was that really a good poll? They didn't know who they were polling. It's unsubstantiated data, and they polled their own bureaucracy. So I'm very concerned about what's in the Hillsborough planning process, and since this is a regional entity that's looking to do a regional LRTP, I think those in Pinellas and Pasco need to understand what the direction of Hillsborough is, and I think that that is an issue. Thank you.
Thank you. The next commenter is Tom Lucera. And again, your name and affiliation for the record.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Nocera. I'm affiliated with now 5 LLCs that have been set up to solve our traffic congestion problems using a free enterprise business model. Our most recent LLC is called Transbit, and its mission is to enable the blockchain to create the future of a mobile economy. It's a big idea that is as big as the development of the internet back in the 1980s and early 1990s. It'll impact the blockchain. If you're not familiar with it, it'd be something for the leaders to all get familiar with as much as you can, because this is going to be a big deal. We're here to offer private sector solutions to our regional traffic congestion, with the big idea being to create a regional system that is so good that it will significantly reduce the need for residents to own cars, which reduces the stress on the corridors going forward, and it creates a much better quality of life. That's the big idea, to create a system that's so good that people will want to use it where they don't today even consider using mass transit. So with that said, what we're doing, what we're proposing is a high-tech aerial system. It's 15 to 20 feet above the ground that goes alongside corridors. And we have had talks with CSX Railroad about the feasibility of running our system alongside their existing freight line. We can do this. It's possible that we can bring our system in and connect all 3 counties through an aerial rapid transit system. I've asked many times to be able to make a presentation to the board here today, and I'm going to renew that request. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, our last public commenter, Bill Thompson, and again, just for the record, your name and affiliation.
Thank you. I'm Bill Johnson. Since the last time I spoke to this group, I've changed my career. I'm no longer an elected public official. I'm now an individual. I am a volunteer on the TBARTA CAC. When I was sitting at the table last November, I made a comment that this board should define the compelling regional need that we're trying to satisfy. Today, I'd like to repeat that request and suggest that a strategic vision for the region's future needs to be developed, and that would be the basis for community consensus and, most importantly, local funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Secretary Wynn has asked to offer a clarification before we proceed.
Yeah, just, and I know sometimes it gets confusing in the paper and all that, and I didn't want something to get reconfused, but there is no plans to take lanes off of 275. The only change that was made was that the express lanes that were proposed for 275 between 75 and the downtown interchange are being looked at over on 75 down to I-4 as opposed to down through that corridor. That was the only, so there's no reduction in lanes.
But that scenario is in the planning for
Okay. I'm just saying from in terms of the DOT, we don't have any plans to do that.
Commissioners, is this to the same point?
It's to a different point, but it's a clarification I want to get to.
Okay.
Mr. Nocera mentioned that he's actually tried to express an alternative to transportation along the CSX corridor. Is there any reason, or did this actually happen when he actually asked to do a presentation but was turned down?
I wasn't, I apologize, I either wasn't aware or didn't register the request if you spoke to me. The board has accommodated similar requests in the past. If it's a desire of a board member to do that, we can do that. Not today, but we will look for an appropriate time and amount of time to do that if the board is comfortable with that. Okay, so one other item. Manny, I apologize. I welcomed folks who were new at the table, at least earlier. I didn't welcome you for Pasco.
Yeah.
Welcome. Would someone from Pasco like to just point out the logistics of the building that we might need to know about?
The only thing I was going to say, do not go into that room because we have to call 911 to get you.
Secret stuff.
So restrooms are here, the arrows mean when you go inside, then you turn it on. It doesn't mean that you go that way.
Thank you. Okay, so the first item on the agenda for today is to consider whether to update your priorities as a group for the TMA, for the transportation management area that includes the most heavily urbanized areas of Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Pasco counties. You have been having discussions about this for the last couple of meetings, or at least discussions that bear upon it. I'd like to do a couple of things before opening the discussion. The first is a reminder of the organizational ground rules for the TMA leadership group. Your ground rules, and those are the only organizing document you have, stipulate that you will proceed by consensus, which means effectively that you all have to agree for something to become a priority or to change established priorities. I'd like to, and I might need help doing this, I'd like to offer some thoughts on what constitutes consensus. Manny, thank you. If you can open up the approach to consensus document right there. Thank you. That's good. Before going over this, I'd like to point out, we have a very flexible discussion rule. Everyone around the table, and occasionally folks who are not around the table, participate in the discussion. However, the decision-making members of the group are the formally appointed representatives of the 3 constituent MPOs. So there are only 9 decision-making members of the group. They are the individuals appointed by their respective MPOs. So the folks whom we have today from Pasco, Commissioner Mariano, Commissioner Starkey, from Hillsborough, Commissioner Kemp, Commissioner Merman, and Charles Klug as an alternate for Councilman Cohen. From Pinellas, we have Commissioner Eggers and Commissioner Tornga. So those are the folks who need to reach agreement. They do so with the benefit of the discussion of everyone around the table. But when we come to a decision point today, those are the folks whom I will poll to see if there is agreement on how to go forward. And that's the way it's been done since the establishment of the group. A couple of thoughts on what constitutes consensus, because on some of the priorities before the group, some of you have seen great potential and some of you have seen great peril. And that's not a situation that's arisen often in the past. By this time of the year, you've pretty much gotten to a solid consensus that just needed to be ratified. But that may or may not be the case on all points this year. I will offer the observation that it is still largely the case. Whatever your thoughts on some of the individual possibilities in the priorities list, this group has worked together well and shares a lot of common ground on the transportation future of the region. So here are some thoughts on what might constitute consensus. It is not, emphatically not, that everything on a list is everyone's first priority. That would be wonderful. It does occasionally happen, but it doesn't always happen, and it's not needed for a decision. You might find that the group of priorities as a whole is exactly what you like, or what you would like, and you might be a 1 on this scale. You can say an unqualified yes, and you're satisfied that it's an expression of the wisdom of the group, and you're just happy as can be with it. You might not feel that happy with it, but you might find it perfectly acceptable. It includes what you need. It doesn't include anything you think is seriously prejudicial, perhaps, but you find the decision acceptable. It's not your first choice. You can live with it, is another possibility. You're not especially enthusiastic about it, or again, about all points in it. Okay? So, we're looking at a list. You're not going to vote on each item individually. You're going to approve a package of priorities. Fourth one, you don't fully agree with the decision and need to register that view publicly. You think it's important, but you choose not to block it. That is a possibility as well. And the last one is you don't agree and you feel strongly enough that you feel you do need to block it. And at that point, you do not have consensus. Obviously, our hope is to move the entire group as far towards the top of that scale as possible. This is a document that was handed out at various points in previous years. We can distribute it again if you would find it helpful. It also talks about consensus as a process of jointly educating each other on your concerns, a fair and open process, and then the comments about what constitutes consensus. Doesn't say anything about what constitutes computer skills. I've lost the mouse. Okay. So, before we start the Before we start the discussion, I want to recap briefly some of the discussion from the last meeting. There was an update at the last meeting on the regional transit feasibility plan. In the course of that discussion, the suggestion arose that for the priorities of this group, what would be most important would be the next steps. That it was perhaps premature to look at all of the detail in the plan, but there were two items in particular that lent themselves to talking about next steps and that were of interest for the priorities discussion to various folks around the room. Not equal interest to everybody. One was beginning to explore what it would take to acquire right-of-way from CSX. Whether that meant approaching the legislature or other actions. And the other was, in Pinellas at least, strengthening the shoulder during reconstruction of the interstate system to at least potentially accommodate future shoulder running rapid transit in Pinellas. And there was a recognition that public comment had not been completed on the transit feasibility plan, that actually taking action was on even the shoulder strengthening would be several months away, and so that was the focus of the discussion at the last meeting. You will find a, I think, useful recap of that discussion in the minutes of the last meeting. So I'll take the comment in just a moment. The next step, I'd like to hear from each MPO about your discussions since then, because I know there have been important discussions that will affect today's conversation in at least a couple of the MPOs. So, Beth.
Thank you. Thank you. Hillsborough MPO has had extensive discussion about the regional transit feasibility plan recommendations. At this time, we're not prepared to advocate for moving forward with that plan in Hillsborough. We will be looking for the results of a peer review study that Hillsborough County will be conducting. And so we'll be revisiting this project after that review is conducted. So for today's purposes, for our priority list for this year, I would suggest that item C under regional transit catalyst projects, which may include, and C says...
Actually, if we can give everyone a moment to find that in the packet.
Sure. Yes, C simply says further development.
In your packet.
Further development of the regional transit feasibility plan. And so I would like to suggest if we do keep that in the list this year, that be maybe framed as implementation of an initial segment in Pinellas County, if Pinellas is interested in that topic. The other adjustment that I'd ask for in this year's priority list, in the priority list for this year, is in the language under interstate modernization projects, and that reflects that the supplemental environmental impact statement for the Tampa interstate study is currently ongoing. So rather than saying that we're asking for funding for reevaluation of the Tampa interstate study EIS, since that's already been funded and is ongoing right now, that we instead say funding is requested for reconstruction of 2 interchanges pending the reevaluation of the Tampa interstate study EIS.
Thank you. And I apologize, but what was the action you very carefully and articulately requested in item C? Is it just to proceed under that, or was there any changed item C that you suggested?
So my suggestion on that, and of course this needs feedback from our analyst representatives, is that if we do keep something on our priority list this year for further development of the regional transit feasibility plan, that it be identified as being an initial segment or project in Pinellas.
Thank you. Anything to add to that from any of the Hillsborough representatives? If not, if I could hear from, or ask, if I could ask to hear from the Pinellas.
We've also had continuing conversations about the regional transit feasibility plan, and at our meeting on Wednesday, the board reaffirmed its unanimous support of the regional transit feasibility plan in its entirety, but failing to reach agreement with the plan's recommendations in Hillsborough County. The board stated its preference to begin planning and design work on a more detailed phase for an initial segment that would run from downtown St. Petersburg to Tampa International Airport, West Shore area, as sort of a starter segment, and then eventually working with the Hillsborough MPO and other partners, Pasco MPO, to figure out how to best complete a regional segment that would unify all 3 counties, but an initial starter segment, and that was a 12-0 vote on Wednesday.
Okay. Thank you. Anything to add to that from any of the Pinellas members? Commissioner Akers?
The only thing I would like is once we finish this exercise, if you could just, I think you started to talk about the priorities being what those next steps are, and do we take it a little bit further and say the efforts that will be ongoing this year, or is this kind of a longer term look? I just want to have that, if you could reframe that so as we start discussing these, because it seems like there's a whole lot of things in here, and clearly that's not going to happen this year. So what are we trying to do with this priority list in the short term? And is that what we're talking about, or are we talking about mid or long term? So if we could reframe that conversation.
I want to come back to that in just a moment. It's a relevant question.
Are we going to still discuss item C?
Yes. If I could hear from Pasco first, if there is in fact any, if you have had any discussion. I'm not aware of any, but
I don't believe the Pasco MPO board has specifically discussed or took a position on as a group on the regional transit study. I do know there's a interest in CSX corridor by Commissioner Mariano, and I did hear that Pinellas or Hillsborough County supporting, looking at the corridor and see how much it costs, at least on a preliminary basis, so we can move forward. Obviously, without the connection to Hillsborough and Pinellas, we can't do much in Pasco County. Unless those things are resolved, then we can make the connection. And on the priority list, I really like to help us with the 54 corridor? We have a study, even we don't have funding to do a study and figure out what we need. So we really need that. So that's.
And that is on the priority list from last year. Commissioner Sparks.
Well, we had our MPO meeting yesterday, and some of you may not know our MPO director has moved to Nashville. So I'm actually pretty disappointed that this wasn't brought up yesterday, because we could have had a discussion on it. I wasn't aware Hillsborough was pulling out of the BRT plan. I represent the county on T-Barta. My thoughts have always been that we are in support of the BRT as a first step going forward. I think it's very important that we take a regional approach to solving some of our transportation problems. And we have to remember, we're not trying to solve the problem that we have today, which we all, I think, know we have a problem today, but we have a responsibility to solve the problems of the future. And if you know how long it takes to get these transportation projects approved, designed, permitted, and built, if we do nothing, we're going to have a problem. And I thought and I still think we have a great first step in the BRT. It's not that expensive. We can mobilize it quickly. It will help all the counties. And Garrett, I understand we don't have all the details worked out, but I think I feel that we should be moving forward.
And we'll be a little divided on this issue. We both think we should do something regionally. I don't feel that this is the best plan we could have gotten. I think that CSX line could have been a lot better. One of the commissioners from the District of Wesley Chapel was saying he didn't think this affected that area this much. So, I see Hernando County's here today. So, I mean, that should be maybe a little bit of focus of their involvement as well.
But we've also been told that we can't even say the word rail in Tallahassee, that it's just dead in Tallahassee. So that's the political realities that we have today. That may change in the future, and I think rail, listen, when I travel a lot. I always take rail, especially from the airport into the city. But we have to be mindful of the realities we have today, and that's that our legislators are saying rail's dead right now. So.
Thank you. I believe it's Commissioner Long, Commissioner Merman, Ray, and Commissioner Kim.
I know we have a lot to discuss this morning, so I'm going to try to be very brief. And I don't want to sidebar the conversation that we're having, but I just learned this morning that I am sitting here as the chair of PSTA and the chair of the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, and I sit on Forward Pinellas, and I have no vote. I'm not quite certain why it is that I'm here then, because I was appointed by PSTA to represent our transit agency in this body, number one. So I'll get off that kick for right now, but I am not happy about that. And just because you said that's the way we've always done it, doesn't mean that it's right today. We have 2 members of our Forward Pinellas / MPO board that aren't here. So whoever is here should be able to speak and to vote. I'll just leave it at that. Secondly, as to the conversation, I would like to applaud the leadership from our Pasco partners. In Pinellas County, we have a saying or a motto that with partners, we do more. This is a huge issue. It costs a lot of money. None of us, any of us here, can do it on our own with our own bodies. We need the collective wisdom, the collective money, the collective decision makers, i.e. elected officials who can develop the policy to move this forward on behalf of everyone. So I'm not sure what it's going to take to get our partners in Hillsborough to come on board with us, but surely these folks care about our grandkids who are going to be stuck with whatever it is that we get to do. And I just want to remind everyone that this plan, the BRT, is not cast in stone. my understanding is the whole reason that we're working right now and doing all this public outreach is to get input. And if there's one thing I've learned in all the years that I've been in public service, it's when elected officials do not want to or do not have the will to make a decision, they ask for another study. I've lived in this community for the last 50 years, and there have been just as many of those years that there has been a big, huge study costing millions of dollars on transportation solutions. So we have a good beginning. Let's work to make it better and take advantage of the opportunities that we have from our own Florida Department of Transportation to use road dollars to develop a solution for transit. Thank you.
I will point out it's perfectly within the purview of the group to change its decision-making rule. I'm sorry. None of the non-MPO appointed members at the table, including the department or TBARTA, have a formal role in the consensus. They're all non-voting members. So after today, it's certainly within the purview of the group to take that. Next, and then Ray, and then
Thank you. First, I just want to address my card went up immediately after Commissioner Starkey said that Hillsborough have rejected the premium transit feasibility plan. We haven't rejected anything. What we are doing is we are bringing in a peer review team of experts in transit to review and the plan as it meets the needs for Hillsborough County. So we are in an evaluation mode. We haven't rejected anything. There's many ideas on the table. Commissioner Kemp has been very vocal and has presented many options. Everything for us is on the table, everything. We're working with DOT, our county staff is. We need to have the best solution for us, and I think each of us individually as counties need to look at it that way, but collectively then come together and support what we can regionally going forward, as long as our county's best interest is being addressed. And I think that's really very important that we do that, because going back to the legislature, and the fact that rail is dead in Tallahassee. Well, that isn't the feedback I'm getting. But the feedback I am getting is speak with one voice. So we have to reach consensus. And I really thank you for your little Webster's Dictionary guidelines. In fact, I'm going to make a copy of that and use it. But I think I think we've got to be very strategic and collective, but the information I'm getting from electeds is that they realize they have not done for the Bay Area what they could have been doing over the past years in relation to what they've done for, say, Orange County, Miami-Dade. They know that. And thank you to, I know Brad talks about it, I know our heart person talks about it. It's very important that we stay vocal on that with our elected leaders, because we have needs, but we can't be all over the place when we're starting to ask for what we need. And that's, but we should not, we have to ask. We cannot be afraid to ask for something because of a preconceived notion that somebody says, rail is dead, BRT is dead, whatever it is dead. We have no preconceived notions in Hillsborough. And we're going to move forward, we're going to ask. And, this year we did get some money for some road improvements in Hillsborough. Very thankfully, thank you, and thankful to DOT for actually, not going against that, because it's well needed. So we really appreciate it. And DOT is our partner, so whatever we ask the legislative leaders for, DOT has to really kind of be on the same page. I'm just saying that because it all works like that in the legislative circle. The port knows that. You've got to be on the same page. So I just wanted to make those comments to clarify where Hillsborough was. And I'm sure Commissioner Kemp, she's got some comments also.
The order is Ray, Commissioner Kemp, Commissioner Starkey, and Commissioner Eggers.
Okay, I'm going to be very direct as Director of TBARTA. I need to understand, does the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan stop being worked on in Hillsborough? And do we start to do the Transit Development Plan that the legislature has funded TBARTA to do? The money is becoming available in July. I need to know how I need to move forward, so I need some guidance on that. So we're continuing with the Regional Transit Feasibility
We're
Plan.
evaluating it, yes, for how it fits the needs of Hillsborough.
And we're continuing to get public input and get guidance on how it might be changed and all that. Okay, just need to be clear on that. And clear that we are going forward after that with a Regional Transit Development Plan for the 5 counties, which is what I've been charged to do. So is that okay? Okay.
It's okay.
Pardon?
I'm just saying, that's what the legislature.
The legislature, the money is very specifically to be spent for that, for a 5-county, 10-year regional transit development plan, working with all the transit agencies in the 5-county region.
Okay, Commissioner Kemp, I believe you were next.
Thank you. I'd just like to bring up several points with regards to what's been said. I agree, Commissioner Marvin, with you about the rail is dead. If we take that as an assumption, then we should have never even included it in this study. That should not be a reason for not moving forward and looking at it. I wasn't here for the last meeting, but looked over the figures that were put forward for CSX, and those were nowhere near any figures that were put forward in the 2012 study that was done, nor what was paid for Sunrail, which is our best judgment of what could be done. They converted the rail at Sunrail in Orlando, paid for by FDOT, and went from freight to commuter rail for $20 million a mile, all stations, everything included. So I'd just like to point that out. If we were to do the 300 or 20 miles in Hillsborough County, that would be something like a $360 million if you look at a comparable at Sunrail. We paid $417 million to do a 1-mile people mover from the airport, 1.25 miles to the car rental place. We could do 20 miles for the same cost and still have $60 million left for operating. I would not say rail is dead, and I would not accept that. And we also don't even know who will be there in the future. So to have that, in terms of elected officials, to have that supposition, I think is quite wrong if it's the best and most efficient way to serve people throughout the region. Or in Hillsborough County, for us to make as a decision in Hillsborough County, which I am fully open to moving forward on that. And I know Commissioner Mariano is looking at that also in Pasco County. I would like, and I'll pass this out just as a point of order, because I know when I was gone last month, there was a statement made that that we were bound by sunshine in this group and could not meet with each other individually, but I have and we'll just pass that out so people will know, but our county attorney's office made a written statement for me saying that we're not bound by sunshine, so that we can have individual conversations out of this group. So I just want to make that clear too. Travel study. We did not see the travel study. I brought this up at the MPO. I don't know why we never saw this travel study that was a predicate, according to FDOT, for every plan that you would ever do. The FDOT manuals require this. There's a travel study that has been done that I asked for in this group, that I asked for at my MPO, that I asked for many times at meetings at the dais or in staff meetings and whatever. And I never was informed that this travel study existed, and I found it online. We made a vote to have it presented at our MPO. I'd also like to have it presented here. what the travel study showed and confirmed is in 2017, when you look at commuters, 91% of commuters stay in Hillsborough County. When they turn a car key, they're in Hillsborough County. 86% when they turn a car key stay in Pinellas. Pasco is quite different, but Pasco comes down in a number of routes, not just on 275, but also all through Pinellas and all through Hillsborough, comes down on Dale Mabry, Veterans, 275, Bruce B. Downs, all kinds of, 75, all kinds of access, and many just going straight to the university. So of the travel study, what it looks at, and we'll have that presentation, I hope, but they have 28 different maps, 28 segments in Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough counties that they showed the top commuter routes from. And of the top 5 commuter routes in any of those areas, 140 commuter routes in total. Not one went across the bridge. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be having express buses across the bridge, that we shouldn't have regional express bus. I'm just saying that that is not necessarily the top priority. And I agree that I really like the BRT project in St. Petersburg, because I think when you move people locally and do that well, you are serving the region. And that is what we should be doing. So I would say that I'm very interested in the future, very interested in millennials, very interested in doing the kind of transit systems that we need. I would disagree that what we have stored here now is what we should be moving to in the future. A couple of other things. One of the reasons that I have issues with the RTFP as put forward now is that I don't consider it a transit plan. I think it's a bus station plan. 430 million out of the 455 million is simply for bus stations and parking garages. And I think that that is absolutely the wrong way to go. We haven't discussed the operations. I keep hearing something as if magical money will appear that is not our own. I think it's clear that we will be paying for that. We'll be paying for that in ways that will take it away from true transit that's needed and very underfunded. So I think those are kind of the main points I want to make.
Thank you. Commissioner Strucky, your 10 went up and down and up and down. First time up, we'll put you next in line.
I'll speak at you, Barney.
Okay. So the order then is Commissioner Eggers, and I apologize, gentlemen, I don't know who put their tent back up first. Okay, so we'll go in that order. I do want to offer a comment, process comment. Commissioner Eggers earlier asked, is this focused on this year or longer term? The answer from the organizational guidelines, and this is my interpretation, and I'm putting it out there now, not because it's necessarily right, but because if it's not your interpretation, I need to know this. Short and long term. One of the things the group has done in the past is keep priorities in place, or at least some of them, and talk about the ask. What do these mean for this year? What do these mean for the next session? And that gives you a way to get a handle on some of these things that are clearly multi-year topics and multi-year projects for that matter. So it is, it's within the realm of possibility that you make minor changes or no changes, but agree on what the asks are. And I think I'm hearing the potential basis for agreement on asks for this year. So Commissioner Eggers.
Well, when we started this conversation, I thought it was going to be getting into the conversation of the day, and I guess we're just continuing to lay a lot of groundwork, a lot of position statements, a lot of what I don't consider, unifying comments and statements. We've been at this a lot longer than I have been a member, and so when you come on board and you try to meld in at the same time, bring a new perspective, and as we continue to change folks on this group, that's going to happen invariably. We've been at this plan for a while. There's been a process in place. And we've had opportunities to talk about the issues along the way, question the process, question the premise behind the study, question the steps along the way. And And the other thing I want to say is that, our residents in our county, and to some degree in Hillsborough County as well, again, I'm going to make a statement, it's probably going to not be completely accurate, but have made a statement in the short term about rail not being a preference, whether it's because there wasn't a regional plan put together, or whether it was the type of technology in play. But it still is about 1%, 1.5% of our residents that do transit today. I don't know what the numbers are in Hillsborough County, but we can all think about what we're going to be looking like and doing in about 50, maybe to 100 years. And I would argue that a lot of the conversations that we're talking about today will be in play. But we have got to go from, and again, I'm going to say it again, we are crawling in transit right now. We're not even walking yet, much less running. And if we don't start working together on some of this stuff to get this advanced so folks start using transit as an alternative, the commitment will be top down, and I'm all about leadership, but it also needs to be from the grassroots up. And if we don't start doing some things that are real, people can grab onto, it's going to be a pipe dream for folks around this table just to keep talking. This year, next year, the following year, we'll just keep talking and pushing. And I think that's something that is a little bit frustrating on my part. I've only been a part of this for a little bit, but I already see this process that we've been true to for now a while getting subverted. Now, I will say this, if we use BRT in Pinellas County, we have an intermodal station in West Shore, that I suppose Hillsborough can have a rail that goes to that intermodal, and we can do that kind of thing. And they can have a different system in Hillsborough County that suits their residents. And I hope they remember that it suits their residents and not them. But it really is important that we start to talk about this and move it forward regardless. I'm again, a comment to Ray and a comment to Commissioner Starkey. We've been going down this road. I mean, and this is something that calls for regional discussion. And it doesn't matter, if you want to use a different mode in Hillsborough County, so be it, or over in Pasco on 41, so be it. But I do think that we can't get away from this process, and it's been something we've been working hard on. So let's not forget what our residents have spoken, number one. Number two, that I think people are interested in this regional approach. I mean, I've certainly gotten much more interested in this discussion, and I represent a lot of folks that are skeptical about transit in this area. But at least from a regional perspective, it makes some sense. And let's remember that we've got to get people using transit first in a reasonably inexpensive way. But it doesn't stop our dreaming. It's the reality of today versus the dreaming for tomorrow. We got to do both. And so I just encourage folks not to get off this for a year, or however long it's going to do this peer review, which seems to be a way to, and not intentionally maybe, but it's definitely going to stall the process if we don't continue that dialogue. So sorry to ramble, but just want to get that out.
Thank you. Commissioner Merman, is your tent back up?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. So here's what I'd like to do process-wise. We have 4 comments waiting. I think, is there anyone else who knows right now they want to comment? Okay. I'm going to take the 4 comments, and then I'm going to put some language up, because while there are points of disagreement in the comments you've made so far, there are also points of agreement. And I want to test those and see if they can be the basis for your action on this year, and move all of your discussion forward. So Secretary Gwynn, Ray, Commissioner Mariano, Commissioner Merman will have the last word before the poll.
Okay. I wanted to clarify a few things, and I feel like I've brought some of this up in previous meetings, and I continue to hear certain things that either just aren't true or are kind of, I say, twisting our role in transit. And just because you keep saying the same thing over and over again doesn't make it true. First of all, we are not driving the regional transit development, the premium transit study. We are not telling Jacobs what the solution should be. We are not telling them. What we are telling them is if they bring to us ideas and ask us, can they do that within our right-of-way, we tell them yes or no, can we or can we not. That's the first thing. Second, as far as rail, we're not opposed to rail. Sunrail very, very important point there. Sunrail DOT did participate in a very large way in making that project. Before we got involved, we were brought a funding plan from the local governments with endorsements from those agencies, which would have to be, whether it's Hillsborough County, Pasco County, the city of Tampa, whoever is going to fund this project when it's done, they're going to have to bring that to us. We have to remember that we're not going to go to CSX until we have something to go there with. And so if we can get that commitment, a local commitment, then that's something that you can go with. The second thing is federal funds. You have to decide, do you want to go after federal funds or not? If you want to go after federal funds, you have to meet the requirements. All right, right now, the rail projects, they may or may not meet it, but if you don't meet the federal requirements, the current statutory law for Florida is that FDOT, the state, can only put in 15%. That means 85% of it has to come from the local agencies if you don't get. If you want to change the laws, you can do that, but the current law is that. The other current law, which is a reality, is it says that if TBARDA recommends a rail project, it has to go before a full vote of the legislature. That's just the law. We're not requiring that. That's the law. So I think it is important to note that there's nothing stopping Hillsborough County or anybody else from going and looking at a local transit project. Pinellas County brought us the Central Boulevard project. We are their partner. We put in our money on that. We do that all over the state. If we're brought a project with a funding plan, we'll contribute our part if it's a good project. A rail project from USF to downtown could be a local project if that's something that wanted to be pursued. But it has to come, if you want our participation, you have to come with a plan and you have to come with a commitment, a written commitment saying this is how we're going to fund our 25% capital cost and our operations and maintenance costs for the long term. We are looking to TBARDA to give us the recommendation for the next stage of the regional study. And I would say we are going to have to look real hard. We have the next phase of the project funded, $5 million for the 3 counties. And the purpose of that project, as was given to TBARDA, and this board was part of those recommendations, was to look for the project that will get federal funding and to take that forward. $5 million we have in the work program. If we do not have all 3 counties supporting this, we won't get federal funding. And if that's the case, why go forward with $5 million PD&E study? So I think we do need to determine, are all the counties willing to tell TBARDA and then the DOT who will provide the funding for that study, do you want us to go forward with this project without caveats that say, you know, this, you need to go in strong. You're competing with the Nashvilles and the Charlottes and everybody else that wants that transit money. And if one of our major partners is not all in, we're not going to get that money. And I hate to spend, we could use that $5 million to do something else. We are providing also money for local transit studies. So this is not the only transit initiative. This is just one initiative. So remember that. We are, I know Mr. Kemp, asked for a tour and a meeting over at Sunrail, which we're setting up. And I would just say if others would like to go over there and talk to them about how that worked, how the legislation came about, how the funding plan, how the MPO, which is a regional MPO, made it the #1 priority for the whole region to spend all their money on. The #1, which is something that would probably need to happen as well. I'd be glad to arrange that for anybody who would like to go. And you can talk because, again, Sunrail was light years ahead of where we are right today. And before we go to CSX, we need to get somewhere close to that. So, again, but remember, we're not telling Jacobs or anybody else what the study is supposed to come out with. If the study doesn't come out with anything at all, fine. If it comes out with a plan, fine. But we're looking for something from them, and that's what's going to be our charge.
Thank you, actually. Great.
Ditto to everything David just said, and to add on some things. I've heard, Commissioner Kemp, I've heard you say about the percentage of trips, but that's really not important. 91% of the trips, 10% of the trips in Hillsborough County is a lot of people. And I can tell you there is a need for regional transit in this area. When we did the TBARDA master plan, you have people in the other counties that have needs that are in Hillsborough County. Hillsborough County chose to be the big dog 100 years ago. So, you know, we have professional sports, we have the airport, we have VA hospitals for people to come from other counties that need that. Plus jobs. I mean, you know, I come from a big extended family. I got people that have no money and I got surgeons. in the same family. And I can tell you that this is a problem for younger people getting around. Their job opportunities are limited if you just tell them they have to work in a very limited area served by transit. So you need to open that up. So I think this whole idea of counting number of trips, that's only one piece of information. That is not how you make a decision on transit. I make 6 trips a day. 4 of them are no issue because it's going to the cleaners or going to McDonald's. My trip to work is the issue. And I think that other people feel the same way about that. Trips are not all equal. Our average van pool trips are 30 miles each way. Those are important trips in those people's lives, not going to the corner store. And they shouldn't be rated the same. Sunrail, I want to correct that a little bit. That I hear all these years. I just talked to the commissioner that's head of the Sunrail thing. She told me it took 15 years to do that. I lived in Celebration, Florida when the light rail was taken off the ballot and they started talking about, this was in the year 2000 I moved from there. They already started talking about using Sunrail. So it's not like a quick thing. So I think we need to think what needs to be sequenced. When your kid turns 16, you don't buy him a Corvette. You might buy him a big Impala that you won't get hurt in. But, you know, we're not there. Our local transit is not in a position to be supportive, and we need to incrementally move forward, which is something we heard in our post-referendum study in Hillsborough County. Why are you trying to do this giant thing? Why aren't you showing success with smaller projects first?
Thank you. Commissioner Mario.
Thank you. Just yesterday, I was at a function on State Road 54 for our Chamber of Commerce. I guess a merger was done. It's now called the North Tampa Bay Chamber. So they're thinking regionally, as we need to do. And Secretary Gwynn, I greatly appreciate your being at the table here, all that you're doing, and trying to like get us in line as far as what we need to go do to try to make it work. I will say I'm a little concerned the way the study was done. I expressed my concerns about the questions that I thought were reasonable to be asked, all about how it affects the rail up and down, how it affects people in Wesley Chapel, you know, are there better ways to go through, and I really don't think that all those questions were addressed the way they should have been. I've seen Pinella struggle, I've seen Hillsborough struggles trying to get through the voters to try to make sure this is a valuable plan. And I think Hillsborough's probably getting a look at maybe it's time to take a step back and look at it a little bit closer. That should lead us all to a thing. Did we look at this close enough? Is this plan good enough to go forward? I'll just tell you, when hearing Mr. Nocera come forward to say he's got a elevated rail that could right alongside the line, and that never come up in part of the conversation, disturbs me, especially when I hear that it costs $20 million to convert our rail. And I just asked him as I walked to the back of the room, he says it could cost from 13 to 15 to do his. And if that could be private money, how much money does that free up DOT to other things? How much money does that free up T-BARTA to set up stations along those rails if they can build the spine of the infrastructure? I'll say it again, we've got a tremendous opportunity to do something big, and if we do it wrong and bit by bit, I think we're going to lose an opportunity. If Hillsborough does something different from Ybor City down the channel side, and it's not going to fit with what's going to run all the way up to 41 to Hernando County, we're going to be making a big mistake, and we're not maybe not going to be able to correct it. How many times do you hear government does something, and they're going to go redo it, and the investment that gets lost? This is a huge opportunity with CSX, and I think we need to really look closely at it to try to bring the region together. And it's a one opportunity to get. 15 years is a long time. We still may be a few more years away, but I think that we still need to keep talking.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller.
Oh.
And I know there are 3 other comments waiting. I will take those after our straw poll.
Good. Okay. I do not want to be a human dartboard. And I'm just saying this, point blank. Hillsborough will not be a dartboard. We are the hub of the wheel. All we are doing.
The bullseye, in other words.
And this peer review team is not a year, it's 2 months. Okay, maybe 3. Depends on how the people, we can get them into traveling with summer schedules. So nobody.
So September, you're saying?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, you said 2 to 3 months.
Well, it's May. You know, probably. I'm hoping that's 4 months. Yeah. I mean, we're not holding anything up. I'm perfectly fine to move forward with these priorities today because it does say further development. What we're evaluating internally is the connectivity to the proposal. That is what we are evaluating, because Hillsborough is growing so fast. You guys have no clue. We're at 1.4 million people. We were supposed to be at 1.8 in 2040. Now we're going to be at 2.2 in 2040. We're going to be at 1.8 in 2030. So we owe it to our constituents. We're accountable. We've got to make sure that we are making the very best decisions we can. The connectivity is very important for us. That's what, but I think all the details are flushed out on regional transit feasibility. I would like to see something pulled out as a priority, and that's the State Road 60. Is that completely paid for, the interchange? That's not paid for yet, is it? Okay, I gotta tell you, that's a very important project. Hugely important. Regional project. Because all of our constituents come to that airport through that interchange. Every bus, everything is going to come through that interchange. And it needs fixing right now. I think that should be a huge priority. That could be a huge legislative ask. Speaking with one voice to the legislature. It's not exactly on here.
6075, you're talking about State Road 6075?
No, it's 275.
I'm sorry, 27560?
Yes.
Yeah, it's on there at the top, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, yes, but it's not exactly, it needs to be prioritized much differently. That could be a huge ask collectively from this group moving forward. I do think that but that's all I guess I have to say. I think the connectivity is just very important for Hillsborough right now. And actually, internally, each county should be looking at that, because our citizens want to know what's in it for me. And right now, with that line coming through, you can see there's not a lot in it for a lot of people in Hillsborough County, especially where our growth is. So we just got to be able to show more details, more connection, so that we can provide transit service to a majority of our population and help our bus service too.
Okay. I know that we have three comments waiting. John, Commissioner Torga, Commissioner Starkey, and Commissioner Kemp. This is not a decision, this is a poll to test where you are in the conversation at the moment. Does this work? Yeah. Okay. So I might need help to get this projected again, because it doesn't seem to be okay, well, we'll do without the projection. I need to ask Hillsborough a question. Your initial statement suggested that the only piece of the transit plan you're comfortable reflecting right now in the priorities is the strengthening of shoulders and canals. Is there anything that Hillsborough is comfortable saying? Let me back up. I apologize, that was misleading. What I was going to put up on the screen was the list as it stands with either 2 or 3 clearly articulated asks for this year. 1, strengthening shoulders and canals, explicitly written up as an ask for this year. 2, the State Road 60 project that Commissioner Merman just alluded to, explicitly and asked for this year, and 5456, funding for that study explicitly and asked for this year. 5456 has been just below the line for years, and Ali alluded to the need becoming more urgent.
Is that the intersection 5456 with I-275 or I-75?
No, it's a study. I'll let Ali
I just want to make sure I was clear on what
describe it.
that project is.
Okay, so,
It's on your list right now. We're talking about making it as an ask.
so we have a task force that recommended alternatives to move forward, to look at, DOT gonna help us to look at 54 and 41 intersection only. But then the task force also have a recommendation for entire corridor. There are 4 alternatives, including no build, that looking at the entire corridor takes a lot of funding for even to study. So that's what you're asking for.
Is that study, if we're talking about, going to include that intersection at 75? Where it's 54 or 56?
Yes, it goes, it actually goes from US 19 all the way to Bruce Lee down, where it includes a portion that connects to I-75.
Okay, all right. Just to make sure I understood. Thank you.
All right. So, okay. So so those 3 are up there, and I guess I'm unclear of the state. I'm unclear about the state of discussion regarding the CSX right-of-way and any ask for this year. It sounded as if Hillsborough would like to hold off until the completion of the peer review study before making any statement about the study within Hillsborough. Is that correct or not?
That is one of the options we're looking at, obviously, because we see projects that will work in parallel. I mean, anytime CSX commuter rail is going to take 10 years. We need projects in 5 years. So we see projects developing in a parallel way. This is all kind of a process type situation. And that's why DOT is such, I mean, we need to ask them, is this stuff that we should be asking for this year from the legislature? Do you consider this from your work plan as the priorities? Because you have to submit your work plan, what, in September or something like that?
We'll be updating it starting in the fall.
In the fall. So are these projects that you feel are doable as asked the legislature? I mean, this is part of the process. We can come up with any idea we want, but if we don't funnel through them and get their opinion also, we're kind of working behind ourselves.
Okay, can I ask you, well, can you remember that question for about 5 minutes? Okay. Because we're starting up in the discussion again, I want to honor the sequence that was there. This is what I think I've been hearing.
Didn't Commissioner Merman say she would be okay with moving forward C for right now since it's development of that plan?
She would. Whether Hillsborough as a whole would, given where they are, is a question. So this is where I was going with it. We did have 3 comments in order. I'd like to take those, then go to Whit, and then ask Secretary Wynn to respond to all of those. And then, if in fact you're okay with this using that consensus testing scale, you may be there for the year. Go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. But we haven't taken that poll yet, or that poll.
No,
So thank you.
I'm changing my course a little bit, but it's up there.
So thank you. So I was delaying any input that I had here because I was looking at the consensus concept and where were we? We've been at this for a long time, and I know I've been here, it doesn't matter how long I've been here, but I've sat at the table since the end of 2014. And thank you, Secretary Gwynn, because the very things that you brought up again today, I think to remind us, there's not, has been on the floor, has been before us for over a year now. That's the entire concept of what you brought up. Thank you for doing that, and Ray as well. What we're looking at here is an ask that we're attempting to go for a project that will meet the requirements for the federal project? And if not now, when? And I'm comfortable because I heard one of the counties here that at first had some issues, but they said, no, let's go ahead. Let's go forward. I was further comforted by the fact just momentarily ago, but I was assuming that the peer review wouldn't take that long. And so we all can do that. I mean, an MPO, we take our information back to the MPOs. We're not making decisions here. We take it back to the MPOs. That's why we have our executive directors here as well. And as long as everything is conforming to what it is that we need to do, then when we come here, we try to give the impression or the projection of what the MPO, where the MPO is. So I've not had to say anything because I have the feeling that we're all going to give the consensus to go forward with what's on this list. And that was just further substantiated by the group over here, in my opinion. So as far as some of the other items on here, for example, to strengthen the shoulders in Pinellas, that's not tremendously regional, but okay. But I would think we might want to look at it a little bit further than that. That was not necessarily on this, was it?
The shoulder running concept was not developed when that was drafted last year.
Correct. So the shoulder running concept is really in here, in the whole concept for the premium study, if I understand correctly. So I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be going forward. But it seems to me like we have that consensus. I appreciate everybody giving their input because we all want to give input at times. But for me, the input was given by Secretary Glenn, a summary of where we stand today. And I don't see any reason why I wasn't changing my position on anything, so I didn't need to have a say. But if we're going to have a poll now all of a sudden, and I sense a little dissension here, and I appreciate you putting up the consensus concept, I'm prepared and haven't changed my opinion on consensus to go forward with this. So I have nothing additional to ask for to change this, other than to say that yes, one voice, we have discussed that for years now, that we need to speak with one voice. We have an agency in here that we've been trying to speak to one voice. We have a study that's going on right now that I'm trying not to influence that study by where we are. We're asking people to give us input for that. We're still doing that, correct? So we're still getting input on that. And I'm comfortable with where we are with this. So my position hasn't changed on the consensus.
Okay. Thank you. I think Commissioner Starkey was next, Commissioner Kent, and Secretary Gwynn, and then we probably need to wrap it up.
So Secretary Gwynn, I want to thank you for those comments as well. And you know, in Pasco County, really the majority of our population is on the other side of the county. But I recognize that Wesley Chapel in this area is growing rapidly, and we have to have a plan. And within our own MPO, we are trying to find those solutions for our county. But within the TMA and the TBARDA, we're trying to find regional solutions. And so I think both are very important. And as we work on this regional solution, we're also going to be working on our internal solution. I was recently in Washington, D.C. with the FAC Federal Committee, and I met with the Senate Transportation Committee staffers, and they are very interested in seeing a regional plan come from Florida. And they know that this Tampa Bay area is so far behind other areas, and that I do believe there's money just sitting there waiting for us if we just have a plan. I don't want you to think I'm against rail. I'm very much for the rail, and as soon as we get this plan going, I think we've got to start working on the other one. That one takes longer. I think that's going to take a lot more lifting, but I do think we should work on it, but we've got a plan that we can afford and we can get going on that's regional. So this just says study it more, right? And so I think it can happen concurrently with what Hillsboro's doing internally and what we're doing internally and what Pinellas County is doing internally. So they're all equally important, but we must move forward. And I'm a little frustrated to see the things you put up there. I'm not sure what the process is here, but I want to go backwards and start going over the priorities that we already set, we already outlined. I feel we should move forward. Those are all important. I'm really not 100% sure what the State Road 60 is, and I think it may be defined here a little bit differently. Yeah, and I think that's very important, and Pasco County sent a letter a couple years ago that we wanted the state to help fund that because that's a regional asset. But those are my thoughts, and I just know in Washington, they're just hoping we come up with a regional plan quickly, because that money is there now.
Actually, Commissioner Kent.
Thank you. Well, I like those priorities as stated there, and that's what I would be willing to support without the question mark after the CSX.
Okay, I was deferring to Hillsborough on that.
I understand. And I would, unless somehow putting the CSX for a regional, if you were saying, and by the way, thank you for your comments, and I don't mean to you personally, or when I feel as though when I'm talking about FDOT paying for it in Miami and Orlando, that's a reflection of our legislature, not FDOT's or our governors at the time. So it's not a criticism of FDOT when I'm just feeling like I'm relaying to people a fact. Also the information, just in terms of, I would say several things. In terms of process, I never felt like there was enough process at all, enough explanation, enough information. I've independently requested lots more information to look at these studies. I have to say that as a member of this group and of several groups I went to, I was kind of shocked at the lack of information we got about this plan, how quickly it was presented, how little discussion and depth there was in it, how little study, and how fast it was passed on. I have said to several business groups, I can't imagine if someone presented you with a $455 million plan that took your money, that you would just look at it and get so little information and so little process and pass that plan on I couldn't do that. I just couldn't do it without the information that I had and the bigger amount of information I had. I do have a letter that I did make, that I did write to Jeff Stewart at Hart, who's supposed to be doing the study, but I know that they don't have any information on the study and have really not been involved in the study very much. They had none of the background to give me. So I will pass that out to you all, questions that I haven't had answered. I could have a whole lot more answered actually before moving forward. I also wanted to say that my information on the CSX is it took 8 years from beginning to end in Orlando, the Sunrail. But 3 of the years were spent working out contractual agreements with the state that we now have a model for. So presumably that could even be done faster. I can't imagine that the highway construction will be finished, we first heard in 5 years. That to me was not realistic. In fact, it would be more realistic to say that the CSX could be done in 5 years and the highway would be done in 10 or many more. I just have a couple of questions about moving forward. And I've asked these before, but the shouldering that is being done, I mean, that is not included in this regional transit plan as any element of the plan, correct?
We don't have the results of the study yet to tell us if that's the option that TBARDA is going to ask us to move forward with. So there's nothing funded for that right now.
And the reason I ask is because there was a huge article in the paper that I read and I related to others where Governor Scott had ordered shouldering after Irma of now all the new highways.
There is, no, that's a different subject. What that is emergency shoulder use. And so we do allow during hurricane evacuations for the shoulders to be used as evacuation. But shoulders aren't designed to take a lot of traffic for a lot of time like the regular road is. If we were going to make it a lane that was used on a more regular basis, we'd have to strengthen that pavement. So that's what we're talking about with that. But the emergency shoulder use is already implemented, and it was used during Irma.
And I get confused at what gets presented at what transit meeting I go to or not, but I believe T. Barta had a shouldering presentation, but this group hasn't had it, as well as MPOs locally, which I think is a big element of this plan, which should be understood. But again, my concerns are with operations costs, and I would like to devote all our dollars, as many as possible, to operations. And as I see the regional transit plan as it sits now, 430 million out of 455 million is bus stations. As I've said, it's a bus station parking garage plan. So I do not want to move forward on that if it means investing, and I appreciate that you said that. You don't want to invest dollars in something that ultimately isn't going to move forward, and I don't want to either. You know, I would not be in consensus on the original sheet as I understand it.
Well, the original sheet is adopted. The original priorities are your priorities, this group's priorities from last year. It would take consensus to change them. It sounds as if there is consensus on some next steps pending Hillsborough's, maybe not yours, but Hillsborough's, I have difficulty with that, final position on this. Okay, quick, thank you for your patience, and then Secretary Gwynn, I'll ask you to respond, and we'll take a poll on it anyway. I'm sorry, oh yes.
So I just wanted to address a couple things about the list. In terms of the shoulder improvements in Pinellas County, we did have a presentation at the TMA Leadership Group meeting, I believe at the February meeting, where we talked about a shoulder running operation when traffic congestion reaches a certain level and buses would be operating at a very slow speed, but to deviate out of that congestion. And that's a great pilot project that we would like to see implemented in short order if feasible, but that's not the same thing as the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan Catalyst recommendation. So I want to be more clear in that list that was up there a minute ago. What we're asking for in Pinellas County is an initial phase of the Catalyst Bus Rapid Transit project that would connect downtown St. Petersburg to West Shore, and all that entails. The next phase to be advanced through TBARDA would be essentially conducting a more detailed engineering and design analysis of refining that proposal for that connection as an initial phase. So it's more than just strengthening the shoulders in Pinellas County. Regarding the stations, we have not weighed in as a group or as an individual MPO on the number of stations identified in that regional transit feasibility plan or how those stations would be developed. We are doing a gateway area mid-county master plan right now with FDOT's participation that would identify an intermodal facility in the gateway area. That presumably would be one of these stations. And I don't know if there are 2, 3, or 4 stations that would be in that initial segment, but all bets are off about what those stations would look like and how they would be funded. So I think those numbers would have to be revisited. So I just want to clarify that for any list that the Pinellas MPO would like to see on this, it's more than just hardening the shoulders. That is sort of maybe an initial component or a piece of it, but it's getting something up and running. And we have not had a public discussion about this yet, so I'm a little hesitant, but I will say that we are working toward a joint meeting of our PSTA board, our Board of County Commissioners, and our Ford Pinellas board later this year to discuss potential local funding commitments that we'll be able to make this year or soon thereafter on a capital commitment and an operating commitment for that initial phase, and maybe more beyond that. We have a presentation to the Tourist Development Commission or Council in June, and then we'd like to follow that up later this year with that joint workshop. So we are very much working toward committing dollars to see this move forward.
Okay. I'll let Ray in here.
Just 2 things very quickly.
There you go.
Okay, so there's
and this is for Hillsborough County. Jacobs has provided an answer to Commissioner Kemp's letter. I believe they have 30 copies of it here today. I've been talking to them about that, and thank you. Okay, to repeat, we have an answer to the letter to Jeff Seward from Hart of Commissioner Kemp's questions, and I believe I've been told there's 30 copies of the answers here today. Secondly, I want to remind everybody that this plan is by no means done. It's in a process. On July 20th, TBAR is hosting a kickoff to get public comments from elected officials. You know, the station issues, all these things are yet to be decided, so there's lots of room for change.
Okay, thank you. Secretary Gwynn, you get the last word.
I'll try to get through it really quick. First, on the 275 State Road 60 interchange, we don't need to do, I don't think, anything legislatively to ask for money. When the SEIS is complete later, well, actually it'll be about this time next year when we start finishing that up, then we'll be able to put money back into the work program to fund whatever it is that comes out of the SEIS. So if we ask for earmark type money, you know, that's double-edged sword. If it's approved, okay. If it's not, then you can't work on that project at all for a year, and it could get vetoed, who knows. The 54 and 56, and we are funding a study and completing a study on the 41 intersection at this point, and we're also, of course, building the DDI over at the interstate. And Diverging Diamond Interchange, and we're also currently conducting a number of studies along the corridor for safety, but we're going to continue to prioritize that in our own work program. So, as I told you, we're actually adding a part of it into the SIS instead of taking a piece out. So that will help.
Secretary, what is DDI? What is that?
Oh, it's Diverging Diamond Interchange. It's starting to become a little more known, but if you go down to Sarasota County at University and I-75, they just built one. What it does is basically it crisscrosses traffic through an interchange to make left turns go not on the signal. But if you really want to see it, if you Google Diverging Diamond Interchange, they've got videos of it. It's really pretty interesting. We're building one in Weston Chapel, and we've got one programmed to be built on I-75 and Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard over just south of I-4. So, okay, the shoulders. We have a pilot project. We're getting ready to start on that. That'll be not the shoulder concept we talked about in the regional transit plan, but a separate pilot project that we're doing. With Pinellas County, and you know, when we look at where we're putting a lot of the money going forward, especially SIS money, which is statewide allocated as opposed to by local MPO, one of the things we obviously look at is consensus from the MPO as far as what they want and how strong they support it. I know that right now Pinellas County has asked us to look at bringing express lanes from the Gateway project down 275 into 375, and also to look at using that as a transit corridor. And so we've accelerated that project based on the support and the information we've gotten from Pinellas. So that'll be moving forward into the next stage. And we're looking at potentially having that project tie into Howard Franklin, which would give us a route all the way up into the airport area. So that's the shoulder project. The airport interchange. Was there anything else? The CSX, I think we've already talked about what we need from that. So
page 7 would remain the group's priorities. These are specific asks for 2018-19 to move those priorities forward.
I'd say that the things that need to move forward are really, other than the CSX corridor, the other things are already moving forward. And so...
including the initial phase?
No, we're doing this, the one project, the pilot project. But the strengthening of the shoulder, remember, this first phase of the study is just a feasibility study. Yeah. The PD&E study will get into the details as far as where stations are, how many. What you see in the feasibility study isn't a final plan. And there's a lot of, if you don't want to have the stations be as, all that will be figured out in the next stage of the study. But in order for the next stage of the study to be funded and us feel good about it, I think we got to be sure that nobody's just going to veto it at the end of the study, because then we got nothing to bring to federal government. We wasted $5 million.
Beth, does this need to be heard before the poll?
Yes, I would like to clarify what the language is up here, because you said the list as is with the following priority asks for 18 and 19. What we're going to do with this language is incorporate it into our TIP priority list for this year that goes to the Department of Transportation and that we take to our legislative delegation. So if we say the list as is, that means that everything that is on the list right now goes on our MPO priority list and to the legislative delegation during the next year. So I want to come back to my suggestion at the beginning of this meeting, which was asking for 2 changes to the list as is. The list as is already includes the State Route 5456 corridor, with funding being requested to complete a multimodal concept and corridor assessment/impact study. The list already reflects funding for the reconstruction of the I-275 State Route 60 interchange. You just heard Secretary Gwynn say that that will be pending the outcome of the EIS work that is going on right now. So I would just like to ask for a clarification of that language on this list that says funding is requested for reconstruction of those 2 I-275 interchanges pending reevaluation of the Tampa Interstate Study EIS. And then I would like to honor Pinellas MPO's position that they would like us to be supporting more than just strengthening shoulders in Pinellas, that they're looking at this as an incremental implementation of the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan. This gives us some time in Hillsborough to look at the concept and figure out how we're going to build that connectivity as a region. But there's no reason why Pinellas can't move forward with that initial segment, and I think we would support Pinellas in that. So I would again ask for item C, further development of the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan, to be changed to implementation of an initial segment of the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan in Pinellas between downtown St. Pete and the West Shore Tampa International Airport area.
Okay, so let me add that language here.
Well, but you have to see if the rest of us like that language.
All right, so let me poll on the concept first, and then we'll poll on the specific changes. And I understand that Commissioner Merman has to leave shortly, so I do want to get this before any additional comments. Remember this scale. Okay, we have 5 people in the room who need to make this decision. Are any of you, hoping this mouse has a good range, looking at just what's up here now, we'll talk about specific ways to reflect it in language, and Beth, your language did not really address the last one, I think.
It's already on the list.
Okay, good. All right, so are any of you a 5? Are any of you a 5? Are any of those 7 people a 5 on?
Can I ask
look
for
at the numbers.
clarification?
Yes.
Does their motion take out the word regional, the regional transit feasibility plan?
No, but we're not polling for their motion yet. We'll put specific language up. I'm just looking for the concept. The initial phase of, because we may need to wordsmith a little bit.
Yeah,
The initial phase of strengthening shoulders in Pinellas, which would be the initial phase of the regional transit feasibility plan. So not just the shoulders, but everything that goes with an initial phase in Pinellas only.
I guess I would want that to be reworded to make sure that we're talking about moving forward with a regional plan
Okay.
whose implementation may start in Pinellas, but not to say that Pinellas by itself, that we may not participate in the regional plan, but we'll support Pinellas's little piece of it. Seems to me we should be supporting the whole thing.
Okay, so we'll get that language up here in just a moment. I think that was, in fact, what Whit took pains to clarify,
Right.
and consistent with what Beth said. So that's the understanding. Okay. So, is there anybody who could not support that conceptually among the formal representatives of the MPA?
For me, it would depend on exactly what that language is. I'm fine with supporting it from St. Petersburg to the airport.
Okay, all right, so let's go to the language. If there's nobody who would not be, if there's not anyone who would be uncomfortable supporting that conceptually, let's go to the language. And And by the way, you are not irretrievably behind schedule yet. We have some flex time in the schedule for
Is
the
this
other
language
items.
that we could take to Washington and say this is a regional plan?
That I don't.
Because that's what I'm supporting.
Okay, so
I want to make sure that's what.
let me ask Beth to repeat the language she suggested for item C, and I will put it up here.
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
I was asking you to repeat your language for item C.
For item C, implementation of an initial segment of the regional transit feasibility plan from St. Petersburg to West Shore and Tampa International Airport. In lieu of further development. Right.
Sorry about this. From downtown St. Petersburg? Or just St. Petersburg?
Would that be something you could take to Washington? Is that good?
But that takes the place of the whole state. Of course.
Well, you bring the whole study there for initial approval, it doesn't mean it has to all be built at the same time.
Right, right, just want to make sure that we're bringing the whole study, starting over here, while they refine in terms of, I guess. Is that what I'm understanding?
Okay, we need to clarify this. Let me give you the microphone again and ask for a response from.
I just want to be sure if we're going to be moving forward asking for federal money for this project, it must be a regional project, and would this language fly as we ask for regional funding, whether in the legislature or Washington, or is this just, yeah, that's my question.
Who would like to take a shot at that? It may be that.
Well,
yeah.
We're going to go into the PD&E study.
Get a little closer if you would with Mike.
We'll go into if we get a positive, well, I should say it's really T-BARTA is going to go through. If DOT gets a recommendation from T-BARTA that to move forward with the PD&E phase, that's the next step where we go to Washington and ask for the result. We'll enter the federal process, which will allow us, some of these projects to be federally eligible, federal funding, if they approve it. What we've told T-BARTA is, the only caveat we have on funding that PD&E is we'd like to have a letter or a statement of support from the folks who ultimately would end up having to fund the operations and maintenance and the 25% capital cost, because we know that if you go to Washington without that, you're going to just get sent back home, because they look at regions that speak as one. They don't look at counties or little areas. They want to see a region on a regional project to speak as one region strongly. And if you go and look at other applications, you can look at them, and you look at what Charlotte and Nashville and all these other places put in. They all come together like you'd think they were brothers and sisters the way they act in their application. That's what they're looking for. Are you going to stand behind these projects when it comes time to operate, maintain it, and build it? That'd be the first step. Beyond that, when we look at implementing the project, then the funding, will be looked at on it could very well be a segment by segment basis.
But what's the earliest that would happen? Because that's relevant here. You're talking about language you can take to Washington. The earliest you would go to Washington for money would be...
To enter the federal process, we can do that next year with the money we have for PD&E, right, Mike? And it's a 2-year prescriptive process. I mean, it takes exactly 2 years. They won't let you go faster and they won't let you go slower. So it's a 2-year process to walk through the federal funding process. So you would say, if we got to go ahead with this study later this year, you could start that, and then you'd have that 2-year period for the federal funding.
So this would give Hillsborough time to sort of clarify its own thinking, and still, assuming they want to go forward with some piece of it.
So for this year, maybe the ask is not implementation, maybe our ask is a PD&E phase or an initial segment of the regional feasibility plan.
Right, which is already in the work program.
Witt and Pinellas?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Okay. Brad?
I just wanted to clarify, earlier this week there was a major conference held in Tampa and Pinellas where we had an opportunity to give a tour and talk to the Federal Transit Administration folks that are over this whole New Starts process. And to Commissioner Starkey's point and to Secretary Wynn's point, what they suggested us just earlier this week was that you can go into them with a recommended plan, a multi-phased plan. And you can get them to agree and then allow you to enter the process on a multi-phase plan, which might meet what you're describing, the regional transit feasibility plan. All 41 miles could be submitted with only the Pinellas phase, going through the PD&E process. But that if we did not do that, we did not do that for our Central Avenue BRT. We just did a very specific corridor, but you don't have to do that. They were describing to us, you can submit a plan that would have multiple segments that they would bless, but then you would only enter into that 2-year window, segment by segment, as the locals wanted. So that's an option. It seems consistent with what you were describing.
That's not.
Okay, Commissioner Mariano, and then, unless I'm mistaken, unless this language makes someone reconsider how they feel about the priority asks for this year, I think you might be done with this part of the discussion.
So, little disturbing me that there's a regional transit meeting with Pinellas and Tampa and Hillsborough, and Pasco is left out. When I look at the HART response from Steve, from Jacobs Engineering on this regional transit plan, question 5 was, why was the CSX corridor in South Tampa not evaluated for commuter rail in the step 2 analysis, but only for light rail, BRT, and elevated rail? And the response was, commuter rail was not evaluated due to the ridership characteristics of the corridor. Forecasts show that shorter distances trips being made by potential riders, which indicated urban transit would better serve the corridor than commuter service. Commuter rail station spacing of 3 to 5 miles apart is also not appropriate for the higher density land characteristics of the corridor. This information was presented to the TMA. I don't recall hearing that commuter characteristics weren't really considered. Now, when you get more density to the area of from Ybor all the way down, I can understand how you'd have shorter distances. Up in Pasco, you might have 3 in a 10-mile stretch. I get that. But why these commuter travel characteristics weren't put in, I will tell you, by the way, go Bulls. That rail line would run right down there, and if we were going to go watch a game in Pasco County, I'm going to tell you, most everybody would like to just drive over to 41 somewhere, jump on it, and head on down straight to go see the game. So that's a commuter. The people from Pasco County, as we heard the numbers, Pinellas and Hillsborough, you employ your own people pretty much, but we're a big part of your workforce going down there. Those commuter characteristics, I think it's 54% of our population, head south, one way or the other. And again, that's why you hear me keep pushing the rail. Getting that north-south connection is critical, and I just wonder, what I read right there just disturbs me more, and if someone could elaborate a little bit on that line.
We can take a brief elaboration, and I think it's probably part of the discussion that Commissioner Kemp requested around the ridership study, or I'm sorry?
Shouldn't that be handled in the update of the transit feasibility plan?
Yes, it probably should. Now, we're going to have a much shorter update than we would have. Who will be, I don't see Scott. I'll probably just, oh, there you are. Okay, you're hiding behind from where I stand. Okay, so Scott, if you'll take note of that, and when we get to that, perhaps address it if possible. Okay? All right, so is there any among the 7 representatives here today who would be a 5? You need to block this going forward with the current understanding.
I ask a few more questions.
Yes.
And just to understand this better. So as the initial segment of the regional transportation feasibility plan, if you submit from St. Petersburg, thank you. If you submit from St. Petersburg to TIA as the initial segment, when you talk about places having to make commitments for 25% of capital and operating costs, in terms of starting the PD&E on that, will you have to have a letter of commitment from Pinellas County, or how will that work?
We would need a show of support. We don't necessarily need to know how you're gonna get the money or how much it's gonna be. They say, when you ask them what specifically do you need, they say, well, we'll know it when we see it. It doesn't have to be a very specific form that says we commit X dollars and this is where it's coming from. They want to have a general idea that the local agencies are supportive of the project and that they know that they're going to have to support it financially if it's approved.
But only them, not us in Hillsborough County.
It really doesn't, well, if you're looking at the whole 41 miles, then you'd have to have whoever, if in the goodness of someone's heart, one agency said, we'll fund the whole thing, they'll probably be fine with that. But they, you know, obviously that's not going to be what would happen. So Sunrail, for example, Volusia County, Osceola County, Orange County, Seminole County, City of Orlando all signed on board because that was the municipality who was going to go through that, committed to funding it. They didn't necessarily have to have the City of Maitland or City of Winter Park or somebody else in there, but they needed to have those agencies that were going to participate in funding, and it had to show that there was going to likely be enough funding to do it.
So, knowing that, I would support it as the plan from St. Petersburg to TIA, but not as continuing on with the regional feasibility plan in fact until Hillsborough County speaks for its plan.
Okay.
I'd be a 5 on that.
Right, but that is not what's being asked yet. I think the group is clear that Hillsborough is conducting its peer review, and we'll hear back from you at the right time. Okay, so you're there for this year. And again, there are some underlying fundamentals here that you all seem to agree on, including perhaps the value of transit, albeit different types in different places with different reach. Secretary Gwynn, this is a list you can work with?
What list that's gone?
Yeah, the one that's gone, the one that disappeared. That was Commissioner Merman's earlier fundamental question for this year.
Are you including the word clipping that
Yes.
that added?
Yes. There we go. The existing priority list, we'll assume continues with the replacement of C under potential transit catalyst projects with this language, excuse me, the funding for a PD&E of an initial segment of the regional transportation feasibility plan from St. Petersburg to TIA.
The only caveat I put is that we're going to get a recommendation from TBARTA.
Correct.
That's going to tell us what to do as far as do they want to look at the whole regional system or is it a smaller parts? We wouldn't make that decision. That would be a decision TBARTA would make and present to us.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I am supportive of what we're talking about. But I'm going to tell you something, despite the fact that Hillsborough County has most of its people staying in Hillsborough County, and we have most of our people staying in Pinellas County, what are going to attract people to this plan is a regional plan, okay? Again, I think Ray talked about there's still a piece of those folks that are going back and forth, but it's way beyond that. If you're trying to capture the imagination of our residents in the Tampa Bay area, it's not about divisiveness about this plan. If we're not looking at this as a regional plan and committing to the process, how it turns out, we're not even done yet.
Yeah.
If we're not committed to the process this year, then I don't know what we're doing. You guys can do your peer review, that's fine, cool. But we still have to be committed to this process, and at the end of the year, you guys find out that this is something you're not going to buy into, fine. Your residents come out and scream and yell, and they're supportive of that, not doing it, fine. But I think until those things happen, I mean, I'm going to support this because, it selfishly addresses Pinellas County, but I'm a little concerned about our residents supporting this little piece because it's not what we've been talking about. We talk about a regional plan, and we're already starting to bail on it. And I'm not talking about bailing completely. We're just talking about we can't even get through the year and have our resident feedback while this little sidetrack is going on too, which is important. to you all, and that's cool. But we've got to stick with it. We've got to stick with what we started, and it will be amended many times over. We haven't even done all of our resident input yet. So, again, I think we're starting to pick away at a plan.
This is,
had some attraction.
for what it's worth, this is resulting in part from a mismatch of scheduling requirements. You have to make some kind of statement now to accommodate part of what DOT would need, but all of your members are not ready yet. So this isn't.
But you're starting at the weakest statement, and I think we should start at the strongest statement and work down.
You don't have consensus, I think, for a stronger statement yet.
Do we have to have 100%?
Yeah, you do.
What do you mean we don't have? How do you know? We haven't actually said yay or nay yet.
I'm happy to put it up.
I totally agree with Commissioner Eggers. We need to show some leadership here. Let that premium transit plan continue till there's a final recommendation. I'm waiting to see what the final recommendation in there. They are looking at a lot of different options. We are evaluating it. It's going to be 6 months before the final comes in from all sides. And to take out the big regional statement in here from what we worked on the last 4 years really upsets me. And I'm just saying, let it, we can vote it down in 6 months, but why not, why should we stop it now? It's not going to give a good statement to all of our constituents that we're still evaluating, we want your input, and we're moving forward.
I guess I apologize, I didn't make it clear that this does not stop anything.
Well, I thought you were replacing that statement. I have to ask Beth, maybe we're confused. That statement looks like it's replacing C. Yeah.
It could be an ask under C and you can retain C. I don't think the intent was to water C down at all, it was to move it forward.
That's not what I understood you were saying.
Okay, I apologize then.
So if C is being retained, I'm fine. Take back all my remarks.
Okay.
No, don't take them back.
All right, Commissioner Long, I think, would like to suggest some slightly different language?
No.
I say call the question.
Before we call it, no, just if I could, because this is really important, I know you do. Nobody has mentioned this, but I think it's important for those of us around the table that are policy makers. Last year, Pinellas County had over 8 million people come across the bridge from Hillsborough into our county. 8 million.
Y'all going to the race day.
I don't know where they were going, Commissioner, but what's really frightening.
I thought that better say.
Now wait, what's really frightening in that number is the projections within 5 years are those numbers will be 34 million coming from Tampa International over through Pinellas County. I don't know how many go up back and forth to Pasco, but that is a lot of people, and somehow we have to figure out how to be able to accommodate those folks, because we're talking about the economy here that is driven by all those people coming and going. I just felt it was important to put that on the table to think about.
Okay, you really do have to move on. I think this was my fault. There's confusion here. But Beth, is it fair to say that your language, which you were offering to reflect what you understood to be the MPO's position, leaves C in place? It was an effort to move it forward. Is that correct? Okay, so let us clarify that C remains. There is a priority that calls for completing the regional transit feasibility study plan or plan. As a way to move that forward, you are supporting an initial phase of that plan in Pinellas only, with no commitment from others, but that is really an ask for this year to move the study forward. It is not a replacement for the study. Commissioner Kemp, I see you nodding your head.
Well, I'm just trying to, as I understood this list that you did in 2017 stays here.
Yes, correct.
So when you said C, for the 2018, it was going to be this list, and instead of this C, it was going to be that. Okay.
But I think we modified that now to keep the language on C and add to it, add this other language about funding for a PD&E. Is that
Well,
where we are?
I don't know if that's where we are, because I'm not sure I agree with that.
Keeping the language on C simply calls for completing this study. It does not commit any of the counties to anything that the study might recommend. You would still complete your peer review study. You are supporting this in Pinellas County for this year.
This C is, it says further development of the regional transit feasibility plan, which is part of the process that we're right in the middle of.
Yes, correct.
And funding the PD&E of the initial segment. I think they're two separate things here. What we're talking about is continuing the process, which may get, I hate to use the word just get changed, thank you. But get changed during this process. That's why we're going through it. Residents may change it, the elected officials may change it, but let's keep going through this process and that. So that what we're telling our residents is, hey, your input really is valuable to us. We're still continuing this. We don't know where we're going to end up yet. It may get changed, but at least right now, let's get this thing going where we told them we were going, and then, like I said, it may have changes. But this is an and, or maybe it's a second point, or whatever. But
I would second that.
And I would like a further point of clarification.
Yes.
Whether further development of the regional transit feasibility plan remains or not, it doesn't stop the plan from going forward in any way it is right now, does it?
But it's changed from this to whatever you're talking about. It does signal something to our residents.
It goes to the one voice issue.
Yes, we must be the one.
You don't have the power to stop it, but
Ming, just remind me, I don't know if it'd be possible, I mean, you can always pull the plug on things. Like, you're not committing today to, a forever promise thing. But if we were to say, just move forward with PD&E for what comes out of the regional study, which is what we currently plan to do. And then later on, if you want to do something to try to modify that based on the results of the study, but right now what's in the work program is the study to do the regional study, the Catalyst project. I think it would be better for us going forward to have that we would ask for PD&E of the corridor. And then later on, the implementation of it can take stages, but why go in with something that may be, one, less competitive, and two, then you have to go back and do another one for the next segment. Why not do the whole segment, and then you can do the implementation when you want?
would that require any funding from Hillsborough?
Not formal funding, no.
But
You need to have a commitment that you aren't saying no.
Please, let's not go there.
Okay, Commissioner Mariano?
I want to reference to, on the 2017 top priorities, and if I get some guidance, I'd appreciate it. It said the elevated transit in the State Road 60 corridor, pilot project from downtown Clearwater to Clearwater Beach. Is that the same thing that Tom Lucero was talking about earlier?
No.
Yes, it is. It could be. It could be.
All right, so I'm hearing the fact that it is. So let me ask this about adding this in, maybe take a look, or even just do a presentation. Maybe we should look at the CSX corridor with an elevated transit, and if it's viable already here, we already said it's pretty good for that one section. Maybe they can even do the study. I don't know.
It's probably a little too late to put that on the table as a priority in that particular form, but I think the item that's on the priority list allows the group to explore that going forward. Well, we're at the end of the last discussion of priorities. I don't want to introduce a different
If I
priority.
could just add a little bit.
Yeah.
I think part of it is we need a proof of concept. And they agreed that that short segment of downtown Clearwater Beach would be a good proof of concept, but it does not preclude something further.
And again, if we've already, it's not that going out of the box in a sense, because it's already there for one segment. We've already just talked that CSX was going to cost us $20 million. If they say they can do it for about 13, it may change all the numbers per ride, which is a big factor we're looking at. And again, why it hasn't been presented before, why it's been stopped, I don't know.
I wasn't aware that it had
If
been.
you didn't hear about it, you can hear about it somehow. That discussion may come out later on, but I mean, if we're going to talk regional, I think it's a very viable thing to look at.
Let's put that on the table going forward. Commissioner Gwynn, I recognize that the statement you're asking for would be stronger and easier to work with, and you may get it or something like it after, or Commissioner Secretary, after Hillsborough's peer review is done, but I'm not sure the group is there right now. Is that?
Yes.
Okay, now, so now I'm confused again. Are we not going forward with C?
Yes, you're going forward with C. You're going forward with C, and you're going forward with that language, at least assuming no one has changed their position, that language that calls for the PD&E of an initial segment of the...
So we want PD&E of the entire corridor with implementation of, with that Pinellas segment being the first implementation segment. That's what I'm hearing. And but we want PD&E for the whole corridor, not PD&E for just Pinellas corridor. That's our
This is only
result.
for 18. This is only for 18.
Yeah.
This isn't.
I feel like I'm wasting my 3 years here then, if we're here to just talk about county priorities. You could do that at home, back in your county. This is where we're talking about regional.
How many folks would not be supportive of calling for funding a PD&E, just a PD&E, of the entire corridor?
And leaving C.
Yeah, of course, leaving C in. So you're constrained by your rules. I understand that.
Well, then
I
that's,
understand that. And it's not just one person, it's also respecting the position that the Hillsborough MPO has taken, asking for a peer review before they express a final opinion. So you might still get there. You might still get there, and in time, but you're not there today. And I apologize, I can't call for a vote.
can we change the rules
You
to
can.
a supermajority?
You can, whether that's desirable or not is something I want you to talk about first, but you can. It's clear that the bulk of the group is supportive of going forward, I think, with...
Aesthetics, not implementation, but aesthetics.
Yes. But, and it's also clear that you're, on this in particular, T-BARTA will probably have the final recommendation. And so this is informing T-BARTA's recommendation as well as the department's understanding of where the region is. But until you change your rules, this is, I'll be explicit because we're sort of dancing around it. Commissioner Kent, would you be willing to support a PD&E of the entire corridor at this point?
No.
So this does move things forward. It keeps things moving and allows everyone time to clarify their thinking and at least...
So we've had dissension on this committee before, not everything's been unanimous.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been on it since day one. I don't think anybody ever thought that every decision had to be unanimous.
To the best of my recollection, every decision has been. Now, thinking about that 5-point scale, there were clearly cases where folks said, I don't agree with this, but I'm not going to block it.
Okay,
That's the difference.
The timing on this, the $5 million that you're talking about, is that
if we don't add this part about moving forward with the Pinellas piece, if we don't add that part, is that at risk? Because the timing may get
Well, that would have to be, one would have to go through T-BART. I mean, you can read that statement one of two ways. You can say, look at the first phase and do it in Pinellas County. You can look at it as saying, we don't want it in Hillsborough County. And it depends how FDA or somebody would interpret it. We're looking for them to believe that we've got a project that we want them to, but it would, we would look, whether T-BARTA would consider that a regional project, I don't know.
Does T-BARTA, are we unanimous there or is it majority?
Not unanimous.
No, that's
Not
a majority.
unanimous?
That's a traditional majority vote.
Yeah.
They vote. Can I ask a clarifying question of the Secretary real quick? So is it possible that if a PD&E for the whole 41 miles was advanced, that PD&E could take different forms depending on what you're looking at? So downtown to West Shore, we might have consensus on an alignment and a technology, but as you get into that PD&E, can you spend any extra effort or part of that PD&E phase refining the concept differently or looking at a different technology in this program?
So I don't screw the answer up, I'm going to ask Ming to answer.
No pressure, Ming.
Yes, lots of pressure. So if we move forward with the project development phase, going into the FTA process, you spend that $5 million on this corridor in the plan. Now, implementation plan is a whole different thing, right? So you go after, federal approval for the entire corridor, but you don't have money to implement, the rest of it except the St. Pete, the Pinellas County corridor, then you can, approach FTA about that. You can certainly talk about it, but I think the goal forward was only one segment. It's not going to go well. You have to show there's a plan, there's a regional plan. You're going to move forward. There's a regional plan. Now, how you segment the corridor is a whole different concept when you get into the process.
And we don't need to segment this year. We can, from a
That's
priority
right.
standpoint, we can just say, we're moving forward with the PD&E study for the corridor. And then as, go ahead.
Well, I guess my point is the PD&E process does not preclude you looking at a range of concepts in the Hillsborough area. In other words, I don't want to handcuff them to a mode and technology they're not yet supportive of if this is the motion.
Right, you're absolutely correct, because that's what the project development phase is for. Okay. I think we are arguing something that we haven't really gotten there yet.
Yeah. Right.
We have to get out the gate, because we're in the public engagement phase. We can't even get into the project development phase. There's nothing really to talk about. So once we get into the process, you can talk about alignment, talk about concept, more detail in technology. So we got to get there first. Right. So that's what the $5 million is for, is to look at those different alternatives.
So the suggestion is that the group endorse a PD&E that looks at a range of possibilities in Hillsborough. Is that, you may put it better.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to, I understand the cost effectiveness of doing the PD&E once and going to FDA with a plan for an entire segment that touches all three counties, but recognizing that we're a little more aligned in what we want to see happen in Pinellas County than Hillsborough officials are, and that the PD&E gives them the opportunity, when we get into it, to further explore what that looks like in Hillsborough County. That's what I think I just heard. And I want to be, that's what I'm trying to clarify.
Right, in order to get into the process, you have to show FDA what you want to accomplish. You have a problem, you try to address it. And that's the concept you want to get into, detailed analysis.
Yep. And you'll have the peer review results.
You're going to have that.
That'll
Because
really
that's what
feed into that before we even get there.
Yes, that's what the process is about. So we need to get in there first.
Okay, Beth?
We do have a project development phase funded right now, thanks to DOT, for HART to look at the corridor between downtown Tampa and USF. I just would hesitate to ask for funding for additional analysis of the same corridor in the same time period. Just logistically, we only have so much bandwidth as a community to look at major transit investments, and this is one of our most important transit corridors between downtown and USF. Let's do one thing at a time.
So do you want to delay the USF downtown? I'm not sure what the ask
No.
is there.
No, there's no ask. Just saying, let's let that study, which is already funded, move forward.
Well, the both
Create a
studies are already
project.
funded. I guess what I'm asking is, are you asking for them not to go concurrently?
I'm asking for us not to spend the $5 million looking at corridors in Hillsborough County, particularly when they're already funded for a study.
Why wouldn't they just work with that study?
Yeah, they would work together. They were never seen to be independent. They would work together.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to have a BRT concept on I-275
Yes.
that runs between downtown Tampa and the USF area for a distance of 9 miles. And right next to it, we're going to have another BRT concept that's going to be explored by HART for a street level BRT for that same distance.
They're not-
Now, if
they're
both
not
of
mutually
these wind up
exclusive,
with
though, right?
asks to the Federal Transit Administration to go into a project development phase, we're going to look like idiots if we go to FTA with these two BRT concepts that are within a quarter mile of each other for a distance of 9 miles.
I just want to address that. The arterial BRT is a feasibility study that we think HART is going to do. Okay, they are looking at the feasibility of it. It doesn't mean you will go to FTA process. Doesn't mean you will have to move into federal process. Who knows? It may not be even feasible. We don't know that. But I think through this process right now with the regional transit feasibility plan, it shows that the 41-mile corridor is the best chance to capture FTA funding. So the question to this group is, do we want to move forward with that or not into the process? If we don't, then we can put that $5 million somewhere else, do a better project. But if we do, then let's just move forward, with that concept and see what comes out of the process. May not be anything. We may get federal dollars, we may not. So let's try it, right? The arterial BRT, yes, it serves a different market. So let's see if it's feasible or not. That is another thing that we need to look at. Because I agree, that is a very busy quarter, there's a good market for it. But you're serving two different markets. You have regional travel and you have local travel. So
Okay.
that's my comment.
Secretary Green, you've answered variations of this question many times. When do you need to make the decision on the $5 million?
Next year is when it's funded. So we would want to get the study under contract by June of 2019.
Okay, so there is some time for this group to speak with one voice if it gets there. If it adopted this now, but Hillsborough came back in the fall, they have a September meeting, with a more refined sense of what they find acceptable and not. That would be timely for your study, for the $5 million, for decision making on the $5 million?
Really, we have to step back and remember T-BARTA.
It's their call.
It's going to go to them before it ever gets to us.
Yeah.
And so I would say the focus should be more at this point on, T-BARTA is going to, their charge is a regional.
Yep.
Not a local. So.
Okay, so Commissioner Mariano, are you speaking to this?
Yes.
Okay, and then Commissioner Campbell. And then we move forward, because I don't think you can move further today. I think there's a real chance of moving further by the completion of the Hillsborough peer review.
Can you please get the monitor finished?
Yes, thank you.
I get excited to project.
Good.
So for the first time, I'm not going to mention CSX through this conversation. That'll shock everybody. But as far as to look regionally, when the Urban Land Institute came to Pasco County, they said that the corridor from 54 to 56 should be incorporated as a regional route. Now, just checking with my staff to make sure it's not in that 41-mile corridor we're talking about, but I think it's time we take that study from 54, 56 that we're going to include and put this into the 41-mile study. That would make the whole thing a regional project.
Yeah, it's got to come to 56.
I'm gonna say all the way to the 54 corridor, 56 corridor, all the way around. Make that, because that could be the northern loop part of this whole thing.
Scott, did you catch that?
There's the spine, and then there's the connection.
Including 54, 56 in the
Well,
routes looked at.
So this is a spine, it's not the whole thing. So it must start at 56 and go to St. Pete if it's a spine, and then it branches out in other phases. And which could include connectivity to rail, which would be awesome if we could find that that would work. But this is the beginning of a spine.
Okay. Commissioner Kemp, you get the last word for now.
Well, I'm not even sure where we are in this process, but I would say I am very concerned. I do not think I-275 is a good spine through Hillsborough County as defined by the region. It's not what really will serve our transit needs. And I think the basic thing of moving through the region, and that is not to say that you just don't put express bus up on the elevated highways, but that is what low ridership, and we saw that in the numbers on this, you do not get high ridership. That should be clear. It is truly a fact in all studies across the country. The elevated rail is not what you need to do to serve your communities and get your ridership. And that will not happen in Hillsborough County. I mean, we have not even had an exploration of how that works, but our spine, and to see that, you know, our local projects where we actually have the highest ridership in the region are somehow being threatened or done by this because we're going to have BRT in a way that would work, or all these stops on the expressway in a way that wouldn't work well. Again, I would be emphasizing over the next year that I think we should be getting our operations costs for actually transit, not a bunch of bus stations on elevated rail. If the need is commuter moving, then we need to get operational costs like they do in Miami and Orlando for commuter buses.
I would suggest that that's part of the discussion going forward.
I would too, but I want to, since it keeps, you know, getting addressed at this level over and over again in different ways. And again, I would say that by us moving people through the region in the way that is the best way to move people through the region locally and take people off our roads and serve transit needs, I think what we have here going forward is a highway road worldview, because we don't have much experience with looking at transit. Transit and roadways do not work the same way. Most of the transit trips are under 4 miles, and the lesser need is in a long-term commuter way. So I think we need to address those needs appropriately, and I would say that it should be clear that if we were to make investments in Hillsborough County, and this doesn't come free, if we make investments, we do it at the loss of serving the most transit needs that we have already, and it really growing our system and really serving people well in Hillsborough County.
So
where
the
you
issue
are.
is this is about the region and not just Hillsborough
Yeah.
County. But we can differ on that.
But when we move people through Hillsborough County with reasonable things like the express buses,
Okay.
we deal with that.
So, Ray, when will T-BARTA vote on this?
Well, I certainly,
I'm so sorry.
I certainly don't think they're going to vote on it until we have a final plan, which is going to be toward the end of the year. I mean, this planning stage we're in isn't over until about October 1st.
Okay.
So we're having a big meeting, July 20th at the airport, a big transportation summit to hear about local projects and this project. And that should get people participating in surveys and really reaching out to the larger community. Not just the people that always come to these kind of meetings, but the average 80% that don't, and find out what they want. And
Okay.
hopefully a plan will come out of that.
Okay. All right. So what that means is, where you as a group are today, page 7 remains in place with these asks for the coming year. If as you pointed out, the public involvement piece will not be even over until the fall, and you're not likely to vote before September. I don't know if it's at all realistic for the peer review to be done by September. If it were, it would be wonderful.
They don't have to vote in September. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, I agree.
It's
Yeah,
not even September, it's October 1st.
Yeah.
The study goes through the end of September.
Okay, so you have 2 meetings this year left at which you might meaningfully still amend this. This is a minimum for this year.
2018, or are we doing 2019?
You're doing 2018, 2019.
So we're already in 2018.
Yeah.
No, it says.
Traditionally, your conclusions at this meeting have informed DOT's next funding cycle. Not determined it, but informed it. So the timing for this meeting was originally established so that you could take the recommendations back to your MPOs, confirm them, or alter them, and deliver them to DOT in the fall. Does that help?
As part of our program.
Yeah.
We transmit regional and countywide
So, you'll recall that I said earlier you were not irretrievably behind schedule. You are now. So, essentially, I don't think there's a lot of time to meaningfully start, and I really apologize, the LRTP scenarios today or the updates. I will look for staff for suggestions on 1-minute updates and whether the LRTP discussion can wait till September. How do we move forward with this?
So I guess I would suggest at this point that
That there be a detailed briefing provided to each of the individual MPO boards about the Tri-County growth scenarios project. Maybe you're already doing that. Just to make sure that everybody is in the loop and has a chance to talk about it before we begin the public outreach process, which is scheduled for the middle of July and would run through the end of September.
Okay, and
Pasco's good with that? Yeah, have it at your board meeting.
Do we have any option?
We can talk about it now.
okay.
Let's go ahead and do ours now. How long would it take?
I can cut it down to 5 to 10 minutes.
All right, and
5 to 10.
Absolutely.
The last time.
With apologies.
For 5 minutes.
Yes, please. And if you would, I apologize, if you would introduce yourself and.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Jim Meyer. I'm with AECOM, and we are working with the 3 MPOs, the other consulting firms, on the MetroQuest piece of the regional long-range transportation plan. I am going to skip some of the slides here and get right to the heart of it, but I did want to start on the scenario planning piece, which I think is an important part of this. You know, when we talk about this 20 to 25 year time frame, you know, the reason that we are doing the scenario planning is it's very difficult to get a grasp around that time frame. And what the MetroQuest is going to reach out to people, it's going to help them think about the long-term future. You know, we've heard a lot today that we need to be thinking 20, 25 years out, and so that's an important piece of this. There's the what if piece of this, you know, so there's the scenarios that we're going to present are not, you know, we're not voting on one of the 3 scenarios. It's going to be likely that there's going to be items that are going to come out of this, out of each one of the scenarios into a hybrid scenario. And so the purpose of this is really to build consensus. You're familiar with the 3 scenarios that have been presented before. We've been working with an internal working group. We've had 3 meetings. We have another meeting coming up in 2 weeks. But we need to emphasize that these are exaggerated future scenarios. We want people to be thinking about them, and I'll present those in a few minutes. Ultimately, we are not going to take, as I said, one of these 3 scenarios. We're going to create a hybrid scenario, and we're going to come back to this group, I believe in November, with the results that you could use to help inform your decision. The MetroQuest that we've been developing really concentrates on these couple messages here. We've come up with a theme that presents people in the position of being the mayor of the region, a decision maker. The decisions are theirs. They get to say how they want to address transportation and the growth issues that you've all been talking about today. There are no preconceived solutions. They're going to explore different scenarios, and we really want to make this survey fast and easy to complete. And so I'm going to run through that in a few minutes. I'll talk about the purpose of the scenarios as I go through them. So this is the tool that we are going to go live with. It's been mentioned, the July 20 date. This would be an online survey. And just quickly to walk you through it, you see 5 screens, and I'll take you through each of those screens briefly. But the main purpose of this screen 1 is really, you can see that we have a placeholder photo up here, and it's going to be drafted on every single slide you see. We're still working on the final material. But basically, we want people to understand that there are no preconceived solutions. So we're showing somebody with a marker on a map, thinking about things. We're giving people the opportunity to tell us how they want to grow. And we have the fact at the bottom of the screen that says, you know, we are going to be adding over 1 million people here to the region. You know, how do you want to accommodate that growth? And when you put that in perspective, that's basically taking the current population of Pinellas County right now and distributing that across the 3-county region. And so we really need to think about how, you know, how everybody gets around and transportation in the region. Before I move on to the priorities slide on screen 2, I did want to point out that, again, this is something that we want to make really easy. So the MetroQuest is something people can take online. They can take it on a tablet. They can take it on their smartphone. We are seeing more and more people complete these surveys on their smartphones. We actually have one MetroQuest survey right now, 1,500 responses, and nearly half of them have been taken on a cell phone. So it's important that we get out and get that information. The other point I want to make here real quickly is that we are also going to develop a PowerPoint that will replicate this MetroQuest survey. So all the MPOs can go out and do presentations, do online polling. The other piece of this as well, we will have a hard copy survey, and there's going to be engagement to get out and make sure that we hit different areas and address environmental justice issues and hit, you know, really hear from everybody across the 3 counties. You've been talking a lot about your priorities today. Screen 2 is going to ask people to rank their priorities. And what I've done here is I've pre-populated the top 5 priorities above the line. And you can see, just so it's a little easier to read, we've gone through with the working group, we've discussed the different priorities, and these are the 8 that we feel really provide a good representation of what we want to look at and evaluate in the scenario planning process. When these come in on screen 2, they come in on a random order, so there is no bias that we put traffic congestion or transit at the top of that list. Moving into screen 3 is where we have play the 5-minute mayor, and this is where you get to explore the growth concepts or scenarios. And so you'll see across the top we have a trend plus technology, the Belton Boulevard, and an all-in on transit scenario. Again, keep in mind that these are exaggerated scenarios. We're still developing with a graphic designer right now the impacts that you would see, which is that graphic down in the right corner. So that is not a complete graphic, but it just gives you a representation of what would be on the screen. So real quickly, moving through the three scenarios, the trend plus technology, again, is really a lot of the projects that you've been talking about today, but adding in technology on top of that. So looking at driverless vehicles, connected networks. It does include the rapid bus service along 275 corridor that we've been talking about to make that cross-county connection. So this scenario is going to look at some of the modeling. We'll look at some impacts of adding additional capacity and really see if technology can help us address any efficiencies. The Belt and Boulevard scenario, the main takeaway of this concept is that you would have all of the tolled lanes that have been planned for in the region are included in this example. And so one of the things that you would see is a corridor in Pasco County that would come along, east-west corridor that would connect over and tie in to an improved corridor connecting into Pinellas County. A lot of this growth would be focused in on, or contained within the urban service boundary within Hillsborough, but you would have some shifting still kind of with some residential out to Pasco under this scenario. This would require some significant investment in highways primarily. The all-in on transit, again, this is a exaggerated scenario that takes all of the rail concepts that have been addressed or discussed within the region. It includes that in the scenario, so it includes running rail up to Hernando County through Pasco. It also takes a look at adding, statewide rail connection, and it also assumes that you would have some rapid transit service along major routes through the county. So just quickly to wrap this up, here's that screen 2 on the left-hand side. So those are the 5 priorities again. And those 5 priorities, when people rank them on screen 3, they're going to come in, and you can see the circle here. We will have arrows either red, being a negative impact or it's worse from today, or a green arrow to show you that it's better condition today. So people can go through under each scenario, and if they pick traffic congestion, they can see how their scenario, how that traffic congestion performs for each of the scenarios. So we do have some example measures, just real quickly. The vehicle hours of delay, for example, we can measure that in the model. And clean air and water, we can look at emissions. We can look at traffic congestion near households. Just to wrap this up real quickly, screen 4 is an opportunity where you've been talking about a number of issues today that we can hear from the public. And so the example here on trend and technology, we're going to ask people what they think of express bus service. They can rate that on a scale of 1 to 5 stars. What do they think of driverless vehicles? What about expanded ride share? What about how does this impact the urban area and the growth? Does it continue as a suburban development pattern, or do you prefer more compact growth under an all-in transit scenario? So they'll have similar questions on the screen 4 that they'll be able to explore. I'll just skip over this item here real quick because the issues that are in here are what were described in the scenarios. But I do want to point out that one of the tabs is going to ask people how we pay for it. It will ask them about raising tolls. It will ask them about new taxes or fees for rail or bus service, or what they feel about special assessments. The final screen will be some demographic data, and this will allow us to basically take a look at how we're doing, where we're getting responses from, and then we'll go out and be sure to try to target areas that are not being represented. So I'm going to stop there. I've got a couple more slides, but I know we're way past time. So
actually, you're not way past time.
Okay.
That was a remarkable job of condensing.
You showed the schedule.
Yes, sure. We are going to be taking this out and testing this with the public to see how they respond to the language, how they respond to the graphics. We'll be making refinements, and there will be technical research that's still going on with this. So come July 20th, that's when we're targeting that this would go live, have something at the summit. There will be a web page, It's Time Tampa Bay, where the survey would be hosted. But the civic groups and events, we're going to be going out. 3 MPOs will be going out and doing that. We are going to check the results about 30 days into it, see where we're at. And then we'll have a draft report ready in October, come back, I believe, at the November TMA meeting. And that's where we're going to talk about what elements you want to put into a hybrid scenario. So those elements that we rate on a scale of 1 to 5, we'll get some sense of, do people like certain aspects of the all-in on transit? Do they like certain aspects of the Belt and Boulevard? And that's where we can really piece together the scenario that will be explored further. And so in 2019, the hybrid scenario will then be looked at further, and there will be additional public engagement on that. So we do have a number of ways that we're going to try to get the word out. I think one thing I do want to wrap up with is, certainly we want your help here. If there's civic groups that you want to reach out to, if there are public agencies where we can get this survey out to, please let us know when it comes time. We really want to get this website out there. And last but not least, we want you to be the mayor of the region. Take the 5 minutes and provide your comments as well. So, thank you.
Other questions? As long as you're willing to stay a couple of minutes, Ray?
I just want to make a comment. We used MetroQuest 5 years ago when I was NPO director and director of the Hillsborough Planning Commission. It is a fantastic tool. I was just at the national conference in New Orleans, and we were kind of one of the first to use it, and the Planning Commission won an award in New York from the entire National Planning Association for our efforts in this plan. This is the way you get other people involved, and that really was an important message at this last conference. Part of our problem with old-fashioned public participation is that it's a very limited group, and we've got to get to that 80% that don't have strong opinions, but they count because they vote and they are involved in some way. So you got to make it easy, you got to make it fun, and this is kind of neat to be mayor for the region. It's called the gamification of planning and public participation, and it's a trend going on across the country because we are in a more polarized society right now where at public meetings you have people that have very extreme opinions at times, but you don't really hear from just your average person. This gets it out. We've got so many more people involved in our planning process last time than we've ever had before, and I think this will get even more people involved, which is what we need.
So can we use this as part of our public engagement effort?
Well, this is the public engagement for the update of the comprehensive plans of Pinellas, Hillsborough, and Pasco.
Well, I've already done mine for our county. It's drag and drop, takes 2 minutes, it's very cool.
Yeah, and on that point, there is one going on right now in Pasco. We have 1,500 responses so far. There is a map that people have dropped over 4,000 markers on the map and provided over 2,000 comments. So that's information that you cannot get at an open house setting or going out. So a lot of valuable information that can be used there.
But my point is, if we on our different commissions can bring this to our commission for an explanation, we are broadcast countywide, and we have an enormous database that we can do these kinds of surveys.
No, that's a tremendous opportunity. You absolutely should do that. Yes.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're looking for and asking for. So,
not even commissions, even private sector, large companies, any way they could get this out to their employees, the more people you get involved, the better the results.
Okay, so other questions? If not, I guess the way we'll proceed is updates to the individual boards. I would point out you have a joint meeting on your schedule with the Chair's Coordinating Committee in June, is that correct, or July?
July 13th.
July 13th? Okay? And this group will meet again as this group in September. The updates will probably still be valid then. Ray, quick,
Yes.
the date of the...
Yeah, a very important update is coming on the MPO study that TBART is managing with the consultants of Stantec and Cutter, who are also working on that. That's coming up June 1st at 10 o'clock at St. Pete Collaborative Labs. It's really important that our elected officials and other people participate, especially after being at this meeting. We have to talk about how we move ahead regionally, and this is looking at either combining the 3 MPOs or just improving the way we're coordinating on a regional basis.
Okay, Commissioner Sparks.
I just want to let you know, that date is the beginning of the National Association of Counties. I chair a committee there, International Economic Development. Ms. Mariano is very involved in transportation at the national level there. We're going to be in Nashville on the 13th, so I don't know what other counties have representation.
His meeting, that meeting's on the 1st of
So,
June.
but you said there's a joint meeting July 13th.
Yes, that's with the Chairs Coordinating Committee.
And TMA?
Yes.
That's just the chairman or,
Okay, so
or
it's
a
not us?
substitute. No.
Okay, all right,
No.
great. We won't be here.
Okay. All right, anything else for the good of the order today?
I thought it was saying.
If not, you are done for today. Thank you.
I just want to say myself, my name is Jerry Presley. I have 15 minutes.